Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching What If Naruto Was Prince of Lightning in Avatar Universe. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
The four nations are water, earth, fire, and air. However, I regret to inform you that this story will not start with a happy beginning. As most stories do, children cannot just go into the woods and play without any consequences. This is not a peaceful world. It's not a place where you can travel between nations without risk, or where you can rest assured that tomorrow will come instead of beginning with a once upon a time. This story begins with a war. If we were discussing this past, we might begin with a once upon a time, but that was a century ago. In the past, the land was tranquil, children could play carefree, and so on. Indeed, this conflict has lasted for a century. Firelord Sozin attacked the nations on that day a century ago using a comet that improved fire bending. This comet, known as Sozin's Comet, made fire bending almost invincible and swiftly reached the pinnacle of the war. The Avatar, the person who could bend all four elements, was sought after by the populace at the beginning of this dark period. They looked for him and waited for him to arrive so he could save them, put an end to the conflict, and bring it back into balance, but he never did. The Avatar was no longer there. The people started to lose hope as the Fire Nation's armies advanced. Seemingly unstoppable, their villages burned to the ground, their rebellions were put down with ease, and one by one, their friends and family were massacred. However, a glimmer of hope emerged amid the despair, which kept the people engaged in combat. During the comet, there was a location that Sozin was unable to defeat. It was the enigmatic Empire of Lightning. All they knew was that they were a powerful people, destructively powerful, but no one knew what lay beyond the walls separating them from the outside world. Lightning, not fire, water, air, or earth, was bent by the Lightning Empire. Yes, firebenders were capable of producing lightning, but this was the most lethal and pure kind of lightning. What 5-year-old lightning benders could do, firebenders could do. Sozin's armies marched up to the wall during the comet with ideas that, like all the others in the world, they would crush in their path. However, they were surprised to find themselves facing a lone man in just a few minutes. This man, the teenage king of the Lightning Empire, Arashi Namikaze, killed every surviving soldier by himself. He was the only one who survived to report what he had witnessed. The Fire Nation then abandoned the Lightning Empire. The world had dubbed Arashi Namikaze the Orange Flash. They had heard the stories about how the king had slaughtered hundreds of people before vanishing in orange lightning and reappearing elsewhere. The people had started to feel hopeful again. The Fire Nation would never have won the war as long as the Lightning Empire remained in existence. General Iroh and his son attempted to breach the Lightning Empire's defenses 8 decades later. They were confident in their abilities and brought armies that were far more developed than the first raiders, but once more there was only one man in front of them. This man was Minato Namikaze, Arashi Namikaze's grandson. Like his predecessor, he dispatched the armies with lightning bends that were far more sophisticated than the small lightning that a firebender could create, and with yellow flashes of lightning. The loss was humiliating. Minato Namikaze, also known as the Yellow Flash, gave the populace yet another glimmer of hope. Despite the Fire Nation's attempts to subdue them, the Lightning Empire remained powerful. The people were full of hope once more. There was still no sign of the Avatar 3 years following the second attempt by the Fire Nation. The redhead beauty screamed, "Ah!" Her green eyes were tightly closed, and she was holding her husband's hand like a death grip. The contraction forced its way through her, causing her eyes to water. "You're almost there, Kushina, just a little," Minato urged, glancing at the doctor, who was deftly avoiding the queen's kicks until he was interrupted by a rather forceful squeeze from Kushina's iron grip. "Shut it, Minato. You're never going near me again. I'll castrate you. I'll make it so you can never come near me with that thing again." Minato gulped and went pale, deciding it would be best to say nothing in order to calm her down for their safety as well as the safety of the unborn child. He began to rub her smooth hand with his thumb, whispering kind words into her ear, and kissing her tenderly. Her breaths were sharp and steady as the pressure hit her, and she screamed once more as another contraction struck. Sweetly kissing her temple, Minato whispered into her ear, "It's all right, love, you're doing great." She looked at him and moaned, "Have I ever mentioned that you have the most beautiful eyes?" He stroked her hair back and smiled, "I've only heard childish and mischievous." Her emerald eyes peered into his limitless depths of emotion and power as she breathed, "They're the most amazing blue." She started to say, "There are no words to describe their color there," but then she screamed. Dodging another kick, the doctor said, "It's coming." While keeping his eyes on the infant, the king could not help but notice the man's skill at dodging. In spite of the circumstances, someone doesn't get this good after a single person, so he felt sorry for the man. His voice sparkled with excitement at the prospect of becoming a father at last, as he said, "Come on, baby, it's almost out." The sound of a baby filled the room as she screamed once more before passing out as the doctor carried a baby in his arms and approached a nurse in the corner. Minato made happy noises. "It's a boy." As the doctor left with the newborn, Kushina opened her weary eyes. Minato kissed her forehead tenderly after giving her a tender glance. "You did it." She gave him a smile. "Yes, we did it." When the doctor returned, he was holding a baby boy who looked exactly like his father, golden hair that spiked up. When Kushina's new baby boy was placed in her arms, she shed a few tears. This one moment made all the waiting, stress, and suffering worthwhile. As the baby cried, Minato ran his fingers over its unexpectedly tanned skin with 6 whisker lines on each cheek. The infant opened his eyes upon being touched and gazed at his parents with the same eyes as his father. In stark contrast to her fiery personality, Kushina said softly, "He looks just like you." She gave him a gentle glare as the king smiled and said, "Really, I was thinking the same thing about you. What should we name him?" "Naruto, Prince Naruto Namikaze." Her husband kissed her and smiled at her. "I like that, the maelstrom of the Namikaze." "Hello, Naru-chan. I'm your Auntie Tsunade," exclaimed a curvaceous woman with blonde hair, beaming down at the baby in his mother's arms. When Jiraiya reprimanded the woman, she glared back, saying, "Geez, don't smother the poor thing, Tsunade-hime." Jiraiya ignored it and grinned down at the boy. "Hi, little one, I'm Uncle Jiraiya. I'm going to be teaching you lots of things when you're older." "You better not." Kushina gave a defensive growl. Narrowing his eyes at the white-haired man, Minato remarked, "You're not making my son into a pervert like you, Arobaka." Jiraiya yelled, "I'm not a pervert." With insult before smiling he yelled, "I'm a super pervert," before Tsunade punched him in the face and sent him flying. The final member of the Senju clan, Tsunade Senju, was renowned for her strength, a clan of unique earth benders. The Senju prioritized strength over bending the earth. They were almost exterminated at the start of the conflict, but they were welcomed when they moved to the Lightning Empire. Sadly, their tranquility was short-lived. The rest of the clan perished in a deadly epidemic that struck when Tsunade was a child. Despite being a pervert, Jiraiya was a strong man with a reputation for using intricate lightning bending. The man was constantly inventing new methods and teaching them to Minato, who were members of the royal family in addition to the previous king. He was well known for being one of the king's 2 teachers. The white-haired man turned pale as Tsunade threatened to teach him one perverted thing and you'll lose what makes you a man. Even though Tsunade was the legendary sucker and had never won a wager, she always fulfilled her end of the agreement. "So I'm not allowed to teach the brat? That's not fair, Haim." "You can teach him, Jiraiya, just not perverted things," said Minato. The extreme pervert sulked, but you never took to the super pervert way, so I need an apprentice in someone." Kushina looked down at the life she had brought into the world and said, "Then pick someone besides my son." She did not even look up at the man. "There's millions to pick from." Minato snickered as the man's pout widened, then turned to face his son. "Those marks remind me of the Kyuubi." Kushina muttered, "You too? Could he be Kyuubi's chosen?" Tsunade sighed. "That's just a myth. There's no way Kyuubi would ever bestow someone with his power. The Crimson King is just a story spread by older folks. Why would Kyuubi give his power to a mortal anyway?" Jiraiya noted, "She has a point." Minato sighed, "But we'll just have to wait and see." Kushina abruptly exclaimed, "Oh, he's going to be a heartbreaker when he gets older." The 3 other residents glared at Jiraiya as he giggled and asked, "Have you chosen a fiancé yet?" "He's only a day old," Tsunade reprimanded one day. Kushina said, "Besides, there aren't many children his age at the moment." And Minato thought, well, the Yagami are about to have an heir. At that, the eyes in the room widened. A Yagami. To the Uzumaki, of which Kushina was the last, the Yagami were like a sister clan. The Yagami were strong, ferocious, and incredibly resilient. Their purple eyes and wine-colored hair were their distinguishing features. Known as the Thorns of the Empire, they were both beautiful and lethal. The Yagami weren't conceited, pampered, or haughty like most powerful clans. They were excellent if they ruled because they were kind in their own way and steadfast in their convictions. Given their long-standing friendship, it would be an honor for Minato to become engaged to the crown prince and have a female child born to the clan head of the Yagami. After giving it some thought, Kushina muttered, "It's an idea." Minato grinned. They had no choice but to wait for the moment. Naruto developed into a strong adult over the course of 12 years in more ways than one. He resembled his father. He was even more afflicted with his father's destructive power, his compassionate, kind, and instinctively selfless attitude. As anticipated, the Yagami main house gave birth to a stunning baby girl named Sora. A month after Naruto was born, the Yagami clan head, Akito, Minato, and he decided to engage their children after much discussion as is customary in the royal family. Sora Yagami would marry Naruto Namikaze on their 18th birthday. Naruto began learning lightning bending and sword fighting from his mother when he was 5 years old. One of Minato's pupils, Kakashi, was keen to teach the boy the Chidori, a method he had invented. The royal couple was astounded by how quickly Naruto had mastered it and the Rasengan in just 1 week. His 5-year-old son developed it in just 1 week, whereas Minato took 3 years. On numerous occasions, Naruto appeared to be in perfect harmony with the lightning element, appearing to be one with it. The boy was not even impacted by lightning. The fact that Naruto produced a summoning contract only confirmed Minato's suspicions that he was unique. These contracts were unique because they involved spirit beasts and blood contracts. While other families owned lower-ranking creatures, the royal family owned lightning dragons. The boss beast would typically issue a challenge to the signer. The signer can call forth the beasts. If he passes, the contract will determine what happens if he doesn't succeed. In Naruto's case, however, the boss dragon simply smirked, looked him in the eye, and walked away with a dragon tattoo on the back of his left hand that resembled Minato's. But when Naruto turned 8 one day, curiosity turned to fear. Naruto had arrived at his parents' house looking lost and bewildered, and he had asked them a question they hadn't anticipated for a long time. "What is the Kyuubi?" The two, taken aback, gave the best explanation they could. The Biju were ruled by the Kyuubi. The 9 spirits that made up the Biju were the strongest in the spirit world and were revered and feared by everyone. The strongest was the Kyuubi. It resembled a gigantic 9-tailed fox and had the ability to flatten mountains with one swing and cause tsunamis with another. It was believed to regulate gravity and consisted of 3 primary elements: fire, lightning, and wind. The spirit world, which had grown so fearful of the 9 that they were unable to sleep at night, drove them out. One day they were attacked and derided everywhere they went. They eventually arrived in the Lightning Empire, where they were given a place to stay. Although they haven't been seen since, each beat claimed the titles of the Empire's spirit protectors and occupied one of the 9 mountains of Nagato. A girl emerged descending the mountain years later. She had never been seen or remembered by anyone. She prophesied before she disappeared. "When the lands are divided, he shall rise. With the blood of the Kyuubi, he shall appear. He shall have the power to destroy worlds and realities alike. As the avatar of the King of 9, he shall prosper." The girl had disappeared before anyone could question her, but it was a vague prophecy. Over time, the Empire came to refer to him as the Crimson King. It was determined to be a myth and pure fantasy after hundreds of years. Naruto had developed a perplexed expression. After this, he said a single sentence that chilled Kushina's blood when they asked what was wrong. "There's something calling himself Kyuubi speaking to me in my mind." Minato and Kushina came to the conclusion that Naruto was, in fact, the Crimson King. As he developed and matured over the course of the 12 years, the voice that claimed to be the Kyuubi had taught Naruto a lot. Although it still took a lot of energy, his ability to control gravity was the most unexpected quality. He would easily learn to control the wind, fire, and universe, the Kyuubi had assured him. But Naruto was apprehensive. He only learned how to make fun of him from Kyuubi, and he continued to use his lightning bending. He didn't feel comfortable with the other aspects. He knew that the skills he acquired from Kyuubi would be useful at some point, but for now he would let them dormant. Sora and Naruto were a different matter. Like Kushina and Minato, the two were at each other's necks from the first day. They were constantly yelling insults and yelling at one another. Although they continued to joke around, it had worn off by the time they were 11, and they were now best friends. Sora had become a pretty girl. She had long, wine-colored hair and deep violet eyes. In the same way that Naruto never seemed to notice girls staring at him, she never seemed to notice men staring at her. Sometimes the sight was comical. Life was good overall. General Ko was a member of the Fire Nation Armed Forces elite. He was respected by his country and had won numerous medals. He had a beautiful daughter, a strapping son, and a stunning wife. He was the object of women's lustful gazes and the envy of men. Despite his numerous victories for the Fire Lord in the Earth Kingdoms, the man never seemed to be happy, and he was here for this reason. He was adamant about being the one to demolish this establishment, make history, and perhaps even win the Fire Lord's smile. Indeed, it was he who would bring down the Lightning Empire. He could see that his troops were intimidated as they stared at the impressive wall. The wall was more magnificent than Baezingse as he gazed into the icy eyes of Minato Namikaze, the man he had to defeat in order to win. He felt perspiration trickle down his brow. But dealing with this man would not be simple. He was descended from a man who, just 3 years prior, had defeated an army in a matter of minutes. He was aware that this man was strong, but he had no chance against an army this size. He was merely a man, mortal, and a single individual. Yes, he was only human like all men. The yellow flash said, "Leave, or I will be forced to make you." "Huh? You come before us and say such words, but can you keep up your end of the bargain? You are a single man against an army of hundreds. replied General Ko. The Lightning King closed his eyes calmly. He opened his eyes to see writhing Fire Nation soldiers and said, I have done it before and I will do it again. I wish to not fight, please. Turn around and go back to your families. In annoyance, Ko flashed his teeth at the Namikaze. He turned and yelled, I am General Ko Long. My armies and I will not back down to you or anyone. With his men. Today shall be a great day in Fire Nation history. Take down those that rebel against our Fire Lord and gain eternal honor. The men yelled a battle cry and charged Minato. As the fire returned, the man closed his eyes once more and sighed. Even though they were powerful, Namikazes never liked violence. Indeed, they were attracted to violent women, which is why they typically married them. Minato disappeared with a loud thunderclap and dazzling yellow lightning as one man appeared in front of him, sword raised and a triumphant smile on his face. The men looked around in confusion as the man caught his feet. The king was behind 80 of them and was brandishing a katana in his left hand. When they saw him, large gashes appeared on their bodies, and some were split in half, before they could charge again. The other soldiers in the army watched in horror as their men instantly fell to a single mortal who appeared exhausted and untarnished. Minato glared at them and uttered the words, last time, leave or die. General Ko gave the king a growl. We shall not fail. Charge. The men obeyed their general's order in spite of their fear. With another calm sigh, Minato moved the blade to his right hand. He disappeared after saying, I won't hold back. Then, hundreds of men fell between him and his flash. General Ko began to perspire. The king was still unhurt, and his men were falling one by one when the man switched hands for the blade. He knew something was off, but he never considered this. The man was able to take down between 80 and 100 with his left hand, and hundreds with his right. He was startled out of his reverie by a blade at his neck. He saw Minato Namikaze staring down at him like an ant as he followed it to the hilt. As he surveyed the battlefield, he noticed his armies covered in blood and sprawled on the ground. It was simply unbelievable to him. A force that was typically hardly affected in combat had just been completely destroyed by this man. He swallowed. He whimpered as the blade hardened against his skin. Please don't kill me. I have a wife and two kids. I was just following orders, so, instead. The king acknowledged, I hate men like you. Truth be told, I'd like to strike you down here, but I have a policy to leave one man alive to report the deaths of others to their families. Thank the spirits for your luck. And the king disappeared in a flash of yellow. When the king appeared inside the wall, his soldiers showered him with praise. He gave them a smile and turned his attention to his happy 12-year-old son. The boy laughed and said, Good job, Dad. You had that guy wetting his pants. Ignoring that he had nothing more to teach his son, Minato proudly puffed his chest at him. The father-son act made the men around him laugh. They were aware that the Lightning Empire's royal families were distinct from the others. Instead of spoiling themselves, their royalty always made it a point to meet the locals naturally. This resulted in a stronger nation and fewer uprisings. As everyone turned to face a white-haired man perched atop a gigantic toad, they exclaimed, Wonderful job, Minato. Wonderful indeed. With a dramatic sweep of his long hair, he declared, I am the great toad sage of the... Before he could follow off the toad that hopped away, smoking, he let out a girlish scream before being interrupted by red and white lightning. The only person with multicolored lightning who blushed and rubbed the back of his head was the prince, who attracted everyone's attention. What? I know you're all thankful for that. The soldiers scattered, nodding to themselves, leaving only the king, the prince, and the super pervert. Curious, Naruto said, So, what do you want, Ero-sensei? Ero Baka, Ero Senin, Ero Sensei, Ero Gigi. You Namikazes always have some Ero nickname for me. When are you two going to call me by my name and stop calling me that? Never. The two grinned and gave a direct response. After pouting, Jiraiya got up, crossed his arms, and turned away from the two, which made them laugh even harder. Minato questioned, So, why are you here, Ero Baka? I thought you were in the Earth Kingdoms. The older man turned and nodded, his face strangely serious. My spies informed me about something going on in the Fire Nation capital, and all I need is permission to head over there to check it out. Minato gave a nod. Granted. Just be careful, Jiraiya. Of course I will, but that's not the only reason I came. I was thinking about bringing the brat along as well, so he can understand the enemy. Me? Naruto asked, raising an eyebrow. The Lightning King thought, I guess it wouldn't hurt. You did the same with me when I was younger. The only problem is Kushina. Jiraiya shuddered as she considered how angry she would be if he were to enter Fire Nation territory. Well, we could just leave without telling her. Minato crossed his arms and uttered, and leave me on the receiving end of her rage? No thank you. The white-haired sage pushed. Come on, Minato. It's just for a month or so. You had the experience, so your son should as well. Minato only made his lips thinner. Naruto pushed this time, saying, "Come on, Dad, I do want to see the Fire Nation plus. It'd give me more time to learn from Ero-sensei." "Stop calling me that. Well, I guess I can live through her wrath, but I'm going to direct Sora's wrath at you." Naruto grinned and nodded. He exclaimed with excitement, "Okay, I'm going to go pack now," and ran off in the direction of the castle. "That brat, he's just like you when you were that age." "You sure? I think he's more like a non-violent Kushina. I was quite passive at his age." Jiraiya laughed. "That may be true." The 12-year-old practically hopped away as Jiraiya smiled at him and said, "Okay, so you hold up the shop for me while I go and do my research." "What? Wait. Ero-sensei," Naruto exclaimed as he saw his strangely laughing sensei leap away for no apparent reason. "Isn't he supposed to be teaching me, perverted old toad?" "Tell me about it, Kit. He doesn't seem very reliable." Naruto winced, then let out a sigh. "Warn me when you do that, Kyuubi. You scare me half to death every time." As Naruto set up shop, he heard the Great Spirit's resounding laugh. "It wouldn't be nearly as fun. Then we immortal beings always have to have something fun to do or we'll die of boredom. So, what do you want? Can't a spirit talk to his chosen?" "Not without a good reason. You're no fun, Kit. You try and have a halfway around the world trip with a perverted old man who wants to stop every 5 minutes to peek in on woman, steals your money to be with woman, leaves you in the middle of nowhere for days, then comes back to start the cycle all over again only to vanish once more when you arrive at your destination. I feel sorry for you. Yeah, well, when I tell Tsunade Ba-chan it'll make it all better." Kyuubi gave a snort through the boy's eyes. He had witnessed one of her beating. Even though it was humorous, it appeared to be painful, and he would never want to take one of her blows. For heaven's sake, they flicked rocks to pieces. A snobbish voice said, "Excuse me." An elderly man with a triangle beard dangling from his chin caught Naruto's attention with kindness. He said, "Can I help you, sir? Why aren't you in school?" After blinking at the accusatory tone, the prince reached back into a bag and took out additional foreign goods to sell. He summarized the backstory he and Jiraiya came up with when the elderly man wasn't pursuing women by saying, "I'm here with my teacher and family friend. We're from the colonies." "Where is he?" With a sigh, Naruto put his face in his hand and appeared worn out. He really was. He'd had enough of the man's behavior. "Please, don't ask." Thankfully, the man averted his gaze after raising a white eyebrow. "You have a rather unusual hair color." "It's from my father's side. He was found by my mother's family near a riverbed with no memories of his past. He was adopted of sorts and married my mother later on." His eyebrows went up even more as he looked at the booth and said, seemingly unconcerned, "I see. I've never seen goods like this before." They were from the Lightning Empire, so of course he hadn't. He held up a beautifully printed tapestry with a flaming, roaring Kyuubi stitched onto it and said, "My family doesn't exactly go for normal summer antiques that we just have no more need for, and some, like this, are made by my mother and sister after listening to legends. This is based on the Kyuubi." The man sounded curious and said, "The great spirit that was banished from the spirit world?" Naruto placed it at the front of the stand and grinned while nodding. "Legends like these fascinate my mother and sister. They're a lot alike, you know." The man appeared to think about something for a long time. "Do you possibly have anything on the Golden Phoenix of Sozin?" The Golden Phoenix was described as either a ghost or an enraged spirit. The Phoenix attempted to stop Sozin from invading the air nomads. The Phoenix disappeared from the earth after a few hours, most likely dead or having returned to the spirit world because it was unable to maintain its presence in this world any longer. According to legend, the Phoenix's blue eyes flashed like crystal, and its feathers gleamed like pure gold. It was taller than a man. Its wings tipped with fire. Despite being a legend and a children's story, it appeared to pique people's curiosity even in the Lightning Empire. After grinning at the man, Naruto reached into a box and took out a stunning tapestry depicting the Golden Phoenix standing tall and spreading its wings. It appeared so realistic that it might suddenly leap out at them. The prince handed it to the man who was interested and watched him examine it. "How much?" He blinked. Selling anything so fast was not what he had anticipated. 100. The man gave a nod. "A fair price for something this exquisite. Tell your mother and sister their talent is unrivaled." He would naturally tell his mother that she made some of these, but he didn't tell his sister because he didn't have any. "Thank you, sir." The man took the precise amount out of his pocket and gave it to the boy. "I believe that covers it. Would you like me to wrap it?" "No, this is fine. I'm the headmaster of the school near here. Please visit whenever you like. Sitting around and waiting for a teacher is the opposite of what it's supposed to be." Naruto let out another sigh. "Tell me about it." "Good day." As he left, Naruto bowed to his elders in the Fire Nation manner. Well, he was quite stiff. "Oh, you're still there?" Of course, Kit. Well, leave if you haven't noticed I have a job to do. Fine, I won't train you then. Wait, yes? The arrogant, mocking voice of the Great Spirit asked. What do you mean by training? Well, since that pathetic excuse for a mortal isn't training you, I thought I'd take the advantage you're still lacking in the gravity department. I still don't understand why you chose me as your chosen and not the avatar. The spirit laughed. Please. He's just a human who was granted the ability to bend 4 elements. Many spirits don't even like him and only talk to him so he won't annoy them. You can bend 2 elements he can't. Lightning and gravity, 2 very powerful forces of nature, though you only use lightning. Besides, he cheats in a way. He has his past selves to give him advice and power. It's a disgrace, plus, you're fun to tease. Damn fuzzball. Azula tapped her foot impatiently and reprimanded Zuko, saying, Come on Zuko, we haven't got all day. Yeah, complained the prince as he made his slow way to them. Ursa, his mother, forced him to accompany the girls once more. He didn't mind. He did it with Ty Lee and Azula. I'm not happy about it either, Zuzu, don't call me that. She sighed as if he were a burden she had to bear, saying, but mother wished it. Azula genuinely liked her mother and wanted to have a closer relationship with her, despite what many people think everything she did, however, seemed wrong to the woman. For some reason her favor of Zuko was hard to see. She wished her mother would give her more attention, even though Ozai did favor her. With her usual light gait, Ty Lee exclaimed, Come on, Azula, it's not that bad. I like hanging around Zuko, cheerfully. Azula grinned. I know May doesn't mind it. May and Zuko flushed. The girl muttered a faint, whatever, and brushed past them as the prince began to sputter out denials. Azula turned to follow the stomping off of May, and her smirk only got bigger. Come on, we don't want you to get lost, Zuzu. While the girls ran to catch up to May, Zuko grudgingly followed, complaining about horrible sisters. Hey, Ty Lee said, his gaze a little distant, did you see the tapestry the headmaster hung up in the entryway this morning? The girl with the braided hair nodded when Azula said, the one of the golden phoenix of Sozin? Yeah, I saw it. Probably cost a fortune? May stated, a waste of money in my opinion. Come on, it was beautiful, wasn't it, Zuko? The prince gave a shrug. I didn't really look at it. Azula sneered. Of course you didn't. He grunted and glared at his 1-year younger sister. Even though I didn't get a good look at it, it seemed quite elegant and beautiful. Ty Lee grinned triumphantly. See, you should pay more attention, May. You miss a lot of things. Life's dull, so why should I? Ty Lee started to say more, but her gaze was diverted by something else. The others turned to stare at her when she squealed. She yelled, Haughty alert, and gestured to a more recent stand. A 12-year-old boy, Zuko's age, was serving a customer who was looking at exquisite antiques, tapestries, and rugs. He had tan skin outlined with thin muscles built for speed, eyes as blue as the azure sky, spiky blonde hair, a very uncommon hair color these days, and adorable scars on each cheek that looked like whiskers. He was a sight to behold, Azula had to admit. Ty Lee bounded over to the booth where the customer had just completed paying for a pot before anyone could stop her. The boy was understandably startled when she cartwheeled over and landed in front of him. Hi. I'm Ty Lee. As May sighed and Azula slapped her forehead, he gave her a weird look. Naruto. Naruto. That means maelstrom, right? After a moment of surprise, he smiled. Yeah, you're the first to get it right. Everyone else assumes my parents named me after a fish cake. That made her laugh, and she turned to face her friends before turning back to Naruto. She yelled, What are you doing over there? Come over here. Sorry about her. Azula said she was sorry. Hey. It's okay. I find it refreshing that someone actually got the meaning of my name right, he replied. Zuko noted, I haven't seen you around here before. The only time he's ever seen a woman with blonde hair was when she was a prisoner. This is the kind of person he would have remembered. I just arrived this morning with my family friend and teacher. He left me to deal with the stand while he went out to do, he grumbled, research. Research? You don't want to know I'm embarrassed many times to know the man? Ty Lee bounced. Oh, they haven't introduced themselves yet, right? The gloomy one over there is May, and these two are Zuko and Azula. Zuko and Azula sighed as they awaited the bowing and sputtering. To their astonishment, however, the boy only blinked. When he received nods, he merely grinned and asked, Zuko and Azula, as in Prince Zuko and Princess Azula. In response to their shocked expressions, he said, Nice to meet you. What? It was a pleasant change and a surprise to Azula. This guy made her feel good, and he wasn't scared of her. Zuko, who was also accustomed to the sputtering and terrified looks when people discovered who they were, said, It's just, you're not afraid. Naruto appeared perplexed by this. Afraid? Do you want me to be afraid? He asked in a tone that was equally bewildered. Azula instantly shook her head. No, it's just. Zuko completed the sentence she had left open by saying, different. The blonde raised an eyebrow and shrugged. May, looking at the tapestries, said, did you perhaps sell to a white-bearded man? She spoke for the first time, which somewhat surprised Naruto. Can you be more specific? I've sold to quite a few white-bearded men today. He's a headmaster, yes. I did. He was my first customer. He was asking why I wasn't in school before he asked if I had a tapestry of the Golden Phoenix of Sozin to sell. Ty Lee remarked, wow, it was quite beautiful. Did you make it? Naruto shook his head and laughed. No, that one was made by my mom, my sister, and she have a fetish of sorts for making tapestries based off of legends. Azula inquired, do you have anything of the Biju? At the headmaster's request. Her teachers appeared to become legendary today. He appeared to have been slightly impacted by Naruto. She was intrigued by what they discovered about the Biju, the exiled great spirits. Naruto gave her a startled look. He reached beneath the stand and said, not many people know of that legend, but, yeah. Any specifics or one with all 9 of them? How about all 9? Naruto rose from below and spread out a big tapestry featuring the Biju's roar. After a few minutes of admiration, Azula finally met the boy's eyes. I'll buy it. Really? Asked Zuko. You do know it's mother and father's anniversary today, right? Father doesn't care about that. Azula retorted, yes, but mother makes him be present. How much? 200. With a nod, she swiftly extracted the sum. After a brief moment of surprise that she would carry so much, Naruto accepted it, wrapped the tapestry, and gave her a thin book. What's this? It's just a bonus that comes with each Biju tapestry or item. It's just a short telling of their legend, nothing much. Can I buy this? Ty Lee pushed a necklace close to Naruto's face. It was specifically designed to fit snugly around a woman's neck and was composed of sapphires and emeralds. He said, sure, shoving it from his face, same amount as the tapestry. Naruto reached into her pocket and was shocked to discover that they always had that much cash on them. Do they bring that much to school when regular kids just get out? As he took the money, Naruto said, thank you. According to Zuko, we got to go. Why? May said calmly, your parents' anniversary. Oh, that's right. Come on, Zuzu. Don't call me that. May, Ty Lee. See you tomorrow. Both girls gave a nod. Ty Lee waved as she ran down the street. Bye, Foxy. Foxy? Murmured Naruto. Ursa cried out, there you are, as her kids entered the dining room at last. When the two entered, Ozai hardly acknowledged them. He ignored Zuko entirely and only glanced in Azula's direction to acknowledge her presence. Where were you? Azula remarked, oh, just out among the town. Ursa gave Zuko a startled look and Azula a glare as he muttered, yeah, she and Ty Lee were flirting with boys. Boys never showed interest in Azula, and when they did, they would either disappoint her or approach her because of her crown. Ozai simply listened to the sounds around him, wondering who might attract the princess's attention. According to Ursa, flirting? Azula, is this true? The girl shrugged and sighed, in a way, Azula. She blushed and said, fine, I kind of was. He wasn't scared of me, he was so hot, and he was kind. Zuko's eyes grew wide when she finally acknowledged it as Ursa's mouth dropped a little at the realization that the boy wasn't afraid of her. Ozai turned to face his family. Her lips then quirked. Tell me about him. Although Azula appeared perplexed by her mother's unexpected interest in her, she secretly grinned. He had golden hair, sky blue eyes, and the cutest whisker-like scars on his cheeks. I think he's from the colonies and is traveling here with a family friend who's also his teacher while selling goods, some of which his mother and sister made. She opened the wrapped present. She gave it to her mother and said, and I got one for you too. Ozai, intrigued by this young man with blonde hair, asked abruptly, who's his teacher? Zuko said, we didn't meet him. He said he was doing research and told us not to ask what it was, saying he was embarrassed to even know the man. Interpreting the boy's meaning, Ursa flushed and made sure to increase the number of guards stationed around bathhouses for women. What's the boy's name? Naruto. Fishcake. Azula shook her head and Zuko laughed. He said it means maelstrom. Ty Lee got it right and he showered her with praise. Ursa opened the present, gasping, her eyes widening, then grinning after giggling at that before approaching Ozai and giving him the tapestry. She bent over and kissed each of her kids on the forehead. His eyes also widened at the realistic and delicate image. Ozai returned it to Ursa, who remarked, well, his mother is a wonderful crafter. She nodded as he said, have it put in our room. He then turned back to face his kids. Buy more later, I quite like the design. Despite their apparent surprise, his two kids nodded and left. With a red face and half-lidded eyes, Jiraiya waddled in and said, "Hey Naruto," in a slurred and inebriated voice. "How was the—" The man was sent sailing down the street after Naruto slammed his foot into his face. "Damn drunken toad, leaving me to do all the work while he flirts and peeks in on woman. Hit him again, when he crawls back I will." As he was pinned beneath Naruto, Jiraiya begged, "Have mercy, Naruto." He screamed, "Don't be so cruel." As Naruto set one of the man's priceless books on fire once more, he was the author, and his obsession with them was equal to that of his ardent supporters. He cherished being Kyuubi's chosen and having the ability to light a fire in situations like these. He took another book out of Jiraiya's bag and said, "This is your punishment for leaving me alone at the stand. You do research for these cursed things and I'm just eliminating the reason for abandoning me. This human is too pathetic for words. Why don't you just put it out of its misery?" "Hush, Kyuubi, wait. I'll give you a signed golden edition of my newest book." Before the book he was holding caught fire and the white-haired man began to scream. Naruto gave him a strange look. "I'm not a pervert, Ero Sennin." "Why? Oh, why don't any of the Namakazes ever submit to the super pervert way? Every other male does. Why?" Naruto's eyebrow twitched as he glanced down at the male who was sputtering and crying. Fun as it was, the man could always ask his publisher for more. He required a more lasting punishment. He made a tiny, barely perceptible gesture while grinning, and the old man's ass was struck by lightning. As Naruto watched in utter delight, Jiraiya leapt to his feet with a shriek, clutched his flaming behind, and ran around the room. He ought to do this more frequently. Perhaps he did have some of his mother's sadistic tendencies after all. "Ha ha. Nice shot, kid." Make him scream in pain. Even in this beautiful moment, Naruto couldn't help but wonder about the blonde who was being held captive. Given that brown or black hair was the norm in this region of the world, he was aware of how uncommon blondes were. For some reason, it bothered him. When he gets back to the Lightning Empire, perhaps he should ask his father about it. A voice called out from outside the modest house, "Hello?" The two had moved the stand in front of the small house they had rented after getting settled in. Naruto felt that he just didn't want to walk a long distance to work every day. Not that he would actually work, as it was Jiraiya's idea. Naruto called, hurrying to the door. "Ah, coming," he said. As he left the house, he noticed that his eyes widened briefly at the visitor before a smile appeared on his face. He was genuinely surprised to see this individual at his stand. He smiled up at the man after bowing. "Hello, Fire Lord Ozai, can I do something for you? Forgive me for seeming rude, but I don't think the Fire Lord comes out into public to shop very often." Ozai's brow lifted. Zuko and Azula were correct. The boy didn't seem afraid to him. He didn't anticipate this, but he could appreciate the boy's astonishment upon seeing him. Ozai could have sent servants to claim tapestries that would have been of interest to him, but instead he wanted to see who attracted Azula's attention, who didn't particularly like boys. "Yes, I'd like to purchase more tapestries. I quite like the one my children brought home yesterday." He had to admit that he was also growing fond of this odd boy. Leaning back against the house, Naruto said, "Take your time." He didn't appear concerned that the Fire Lord and his bodyguards had just appeared at his shop. The pain. When the scream flew out the door, drawing more attention than he had already received, Naruto winced with an irritated expression. The Lightning Prince pulled out his foot and kicked the door shut before the smile returned and Kyuubi clicked in the back of his mind. Something about Jiraiya's suffering made life even more enjoyable. A confused-sounding guard said, "What was that?" "That was my sensei, Jiraiya," another soldier inquired. "And why was he in pain?" Naruto chuckled uneasily. "Well, you see, I was sent with him by his request to practice firebending when we got here. Instead of helping me with shop and firebending, he went out to gather research and left me alone. I'm punishing him, so to speak." Ozai asked in a monotone, "What's this?" Naruto turned to face the Fire Lord and couldn't help but smile at what he saw. The image showed a stunning girl wearing flowing clothing gazing into a transparent pond that mirrored the full moon. Her pointed ears and spirit tattoos made it clear she was a spirit. She clutched the necklace around her neck, a tear streaming down her cheek. "That's the moon spirit in her human form. It's a legend told to me by my mother." One of the curious guards asked, "What's the legend?" Naruto caught a glimpse of the crowd beginning to form out of the corner of his eye. Well, he could spend a day telling stories after all. The Fire Lord's mere presence is likely to increase his business. As you are aware, there is a legend that states that the moon spirit and the ocean spirit sacrificed their spiritual forms in order to live among people. According to this legend, the moon spirit was injured by an animal one day because she did not want to defend herself against it. A young boy from the water tribe discovered her and healed her without realizing she was the moon spirit. After he let her go, she took on a human form because she was in love with the boy and went to the village to find him. Sadly for her, the boy was already engaged to a lovely noble woman and was set to marry her. Heartbroken, the spirit wanted nothing more than to cast the girl into the depths of hell and allow her to decay, but she had a better idea. If the boy believed she was a cold-hearted creature, how would she ever win his love back if she had done that? She wanted him all to herself. Even though they had become friends, his fiancée felt a small part of herself shatter every time he looked at her the way she looked at him. She went to the ocean spirit for help. Not knowing what to do, the other spirit took on human form as well, but instead of a beautiful girl, this one turned into a handsome boy. After stalking the boy's fiancée, they found out she had been promised to many men, taking their money then leaving them on the roadside once they were broke. She couldn't let that happen to the boy. Even if she could never have him, she didn't want him to be heartbroken in this way. Naruto stopped the story, glanced around, and grinned to himself. The adults appeared completely engrossed. Much like their kids, they most likely didn't hear a water tribe legend very often. He was even being watched from the corner of Ozai's eye. The two spirits devised a plan, and the moon spirit took the boy to the location where his fiancée had spied the ocean spirit, who was in a form that no woman as shallow as her could resist. The boy's heart broke when he saw his fiancée pursuing the man and requesting money and dates, but fortunately, the moon was there to save the day. A few years later, a love that no human or spirit could match blossomed between the two. They were going to get married after he gave her the most exquisite engagement necklace, but then disaster struck. An earth-bending clan seeking power invaded the tribe. A week prior to the wedding, they were easily vanquished by the water tribe, but some people died. The boy was one of them. Who could blame many of the children and adults for looking discouraged at this? When the moon spirit heard it, she screamed in anger and shot into the air, causing the moon to disappear and bringing down Earthbender after Earthbender in the North Pole. But the boy's spirit intervened, kissing her one last time before he died. The spirit calmed down and carried the boy's body to the moon, where it was buried with his face carved into its surface. Because of this, whenever the moon is full, you see a face, the face of an unattainable love. Whenever the full moon comes around, the spirit cries. Whenever the moon begins anew and vanishes, she remembers the days of the attack and is enraged. That's why we have different cycles of the moon. Naruto showed that the story was over by grinning at everyone. The story caused a couple of women to wipe their eyes. Suddenly, the Fire Lord said, "I'll take it." Naruto jumped, startled by the abrupt declaration, then nodded and lowered it. "Anything else?" "No." The Fire Lord's gaze then strayed to the Kyuubi's photo. "Actually, yes. What is the exact legend of the Biju?" The blonde raised an eyebrow. "I gave Princess Azula the book that explains it all. Did she not give it to you?" "Stillness? I guess she didn't. 100 gold please." A guard took the money from him after he gave him the wrapped tapestry. Well, the Biju were great spirits that used to wander the spirit world hundreds of years ago. No one rivaled them in power, not one being. Their tales told of their power, with one being the weakest and 9 being the strongest. Kyuubi was the Biju king, the strongest of the 9, with the ability to flatten mountains with the swing of one of his tails and create tsunamis with another. Naruto stopped there because he didn't like something he saw in Ozai's eyes. Desire for power. He sighed inwardly, knowing that he would have to go on if he didn't want to reveal his secret. At last, the spirits had had enough of dreading them. They were scared to venture too far from their homes for fear of encountering more of the insane, such as the Ichibi, who was constantly attempting to establish his authority in order to maintain his status as a Biju. They assembled and went up against the Biju. Days passed during their battle before the Biju were finally overpowered and compelled to leave the spirit world. They were also attacked as soon as they entered this world. Some aspired to be heroes, others to fame, and still others to power. Fear has a lot of power. However, some people were unaware that controlling a Biju was impossible. He caught a glimpse of irritation in Ozai's eyes, and sure enough, he was considering taking control of the Biju. What a fool. People attempted to subdue these powerful beasts for a century. They tried everything, including binding them to a person and bending them into submission. The Ichibi were too strong for even the Avatar to defeat. Then, at last, the Biju had enough. They disappeared. "Where have they disappeared to?" a young child inquired. "Really, nobody knows. Some claim to have seen them in the Earth Kingdom mountains, while others claim to have seen them loitering near the edge of the Lightning Empire. Really, it's just conjecture," he shrugged. Ozai remarked, "You have quite the interesting stories." "Well, that's what they are, stories." He shrugged once more. "When I was younger, in between learning firebending and sleeping, I enjoyed listening to my mother tell me these stories. I can't tell you which ones are real or ones she made up, to be honest. In any case, I find these Biju fascinating," Ozai said with a sly smile. "What an idiot he is, Kyuubi. He wants all of your power for himself." "Hey, that's hilarious. As if I would ever bow down to a baboon like that." In his mind, the Great Spirit added, "or to anybody for that matter." I'll take what I bought and go. I'll have someone visit me once more. Then Naruto bowed and grinned, saying, "It'd be an honor, my lord." Naruto sighed in relief, hoping he survived without raising any red flags. Ozai turned and walked away down the street without even acknowledging the boy. "You're a good actor, kid." Remembering the face he made when his ass was on fire, Naruto turned and grinned at Jiraiya, who blushed fiercely before sighing and turning away. "I know I am," Naruto said. "I constantly receive comments about it." "No need to brag," said the older man, rolling his eyes. I'm not boasting. I'm answering your question honestly. The jealous are the ones who talk like that." "Well done. Pardon me, sir," as Naruto sensed a pull on his pant leg, a voice said. He knelt down and looked down to see a young girl with big brown eyes staring up at him. "Yes? Is there another story you could share?" With a smile, he said, "Sure." She smiled broadly and skipped back to a couple he assumed were her parents. Based on the plain style of their clothing, they appeared to be common merchants, not even wealthy enough to send their child to a Fire Nation school, which he knew required payment in this country. Jiraiya said, "You always were good with kids." "That's because I pay attention to them and not go running off towards the nearest hot spring," he sighed. Jiraiya flushed. All right, training will begin tomorrow morning. And it finally happens. Oh, go away, Kyuubi. Never, I'm impossible to get rid of, ha ha." After rolling his eyes, Naruto turned back to the stand, which was beginning to gain traction as a result of the Fire Lord's arrival, which piqued people's interest. Jiraiya started to say, "Well, I'll go," but was snatched by the collar and flung to the ground. "Oh, you left me to handle it alone," Naruto remarked, giving the perspiring man a menacing smile. "Now it's your turn." But Naruto, there's this." Naruto glared at the man, his eyes turning bloody red. He discovered that when he used Kyuubi's granted abilities of wind, fire, and gravity, his eyes always turned red, making his threats more menacing. He only needed to get ready to use them, and then his eyes would turn red. "Oh, on second thought, manning the stand doesn't sound so bad." Jiraiya winced, and he laughed uneasily. When her husband entered the room, Ursa said, "Welcome back, where'd you go?" Gazing thoughtfully at his lovely wife, Ozai said, "I went to visit the boy Azula mentioned." Ursa's eyes grew wide. "What did you do?" "I visited the boy." "Why?" "Azula's one and only chance at love might have been destroyed by you." She reprimanded. She took pride in the fact that she was one of the few people who could reprimand Ozai and still survive, and she always took advantage of it. "I just went to see the boy. I didn't threaten him. He had an impressive collection of goods, and the great majority of legends and stories were ingrained in his mind. In fact, I thought they were pretty fascinating." Ursa gave him a doubtful look. Ozai's admission of enjoyment was not common, so the boy must be something. "Also, his hair caught my eye." This made people's eyebrows go up. "His hair?" Knowing his wife's confusion, Ozai nodded and said, "It was very close to hers." That surprised Ursa. She as in that Lightning Empire woman they had captured. She was a strong woman who they had only captured by accident. By pure happenstance, Iroh had made amends by catching her in a bear trap and bringing her in. But despite all the torture, she refused to say a word, not even her own name, even after all these years. It began to become a game to the interrogators. Who could break the Iron Woman? The winner is the best in the Fire Nation capital. Ursa felt admiration and sympathy for the woman, recognizing that no one should have to endure what she had, but also admiring her for persevering through the years when even the most war-hardened warriors would have broken within the first month. Around the palace and prisons, she was known as the Iron Maiden. She would never break, whimper, cry, or die. The only words she ever uttered were, "I won't speak, I won't give in, I won't shed a single tear, you'll never see my emotion, you don't deserve to see it. I'm not going to die here. Even if I lose my hands and feet, my hearing, or my sight, I will still go home." Though she had not yet escaped, the Iron Maiden had become something of a legend among those who knew her. She was, after all, trustworthy. She spoke, but only with those with whom she had spent a considerable amount of time and not during interrogations. Ursa had once accompanied her husband to witness her interrogation. She was attractive. Her long hair, though now greasy, was golden and would shine like the sun if it were clean. Her skin was pale from lack of sunlight and illness, but she still had a healthy glow. Her eyes were as brown as chocolate, but they had a noble and powerful gleam in them, full of life and fire despite all the torture she had endured. Ursa cried for her, screamed for her, flinched for her, did everything a normal woman was expected to do while the Iron Maiden held it in. Ursa had a newfound respect for her. "The Maiden of Iron?" Quietly, she inquired. Ozai gave a nod. "Yes, but their eyes and skin tone were different. I don't know where he got the whisker scars on his cheeks, he said aloud. Do you believe they are connected? He nodded. She's a lightning bender and he's a firebender from what I understand. They're two different things from two different nations. Despite the voice in the back of her mind telling her otherwise, she thinned her lips and said, so what did you think of him? He laughed. He was quite interesting with an incompetent teacher. Jiraiya sneezed back in the square, muttering, someone's thinking about me, before breaking into a broad smile and a perverted giggle. Perhaps it's a gorgeous woman. Go back to work, Naruto said, tossing Jiraiya a pot that broke when it struck the pervert's head. That was an eye-opening day. Ty Lee grinned broadly as she skipped out of school with her friends. She chirped. I think you mean boring, Ty Lee, said Azula, rolling her eyes apart from yesterday's off-topic lessons. We have only recently been learning about successful battles. As she looked at her black painted fingernails, Mai sighed. Today was once again an interesting. Thank you for the interpretation, Mai, anytime. Really, why are we unable to learn about topics that pique our interest, such as the Lightning Empire? Zuko said. The Lightning Empire, as in the location that repeatedly wiped the floor with us? With a curious expression, Ty Lee inquired. As Azula imagined herself standing in front of Minato Namikaze, the legendary emperor, she muttered, to tell you the truth, I'd like to learn more about them as well. I wonder why they don't teach us about them. We'll never beat them, Mai said grimly. They're just trying to hide their losses. An army was destroyed by one man. The Fire Nation's pride is too damaged to be passed on to their offspring. The other three rolled their eyes. It made sense, as much as they didn't want to acknowledge it. Zuko muttered the last part in an embarrassing way. Well, I could always ask Uncle when he returns from Ba Sing Se. He was one of those that tried to take them down, and failed. Well, what do you anticipate from that coot who enjoys tea? I think he was more focused on his afternoon jasmine tea than the battle, Azula sneered. Azula. Zuko shrugged after being hissed. Ty Lee said, you really shouldn't talk about your uncle like that. Mai said, he loves you, Azula. Yes, he loves Zuzu. Don't refer to me that way. But not me. He fears me and believes me to be a monster, just like his mother. Zuko said, that's not true, Azula. She chose to ignore him and continue walking. So, what are your goals? In an attempt to break the awkward silence, Ty Lee inquired. What are you thinking of? Perhaps we could go see Naruto. Slyly, she said. Before hiding it, Azula's eyes briefly brightened, but not before the group noticed. I think that would be alright, she said. While he is here, we don't want him to feel like a freak without friends. Ty Lee was bouncing around, but Zuko shook his head and Mai sighed. Alright, let's go, she joyfully yelled as she made her way to the marketplace. With a faint smile on her lips at the prospect of seeing the blonde once more, Azula trailed behind the group. Sincerely, Naruto couldn't recall the last time he'd had this much fun. Sure, it was fun to be with his mother, father, Sora, Ero-sensei, and Tsunade Bachan, but it had been a while since he'd played so hard with people his own age. Tag, he had never imagined that he would play it again. He had played it with Sora before, but in all honesty, it was more like if I catch you you won't live to see the sunset. He laughed. He and Sora had a hate-hate relationship as children, and he honestly couldn't recall how or when they began to get along. It just happened. He had his studies, his lectures on how to run the empire when he takes over, visits to the counts, lords, and nobles of the empire and listen to their blather, and training with his teachers, Kyuubi included, even though the royalty of the Lightning Empire was more forgiving than most. You're it? As she tagged Azula, who didn't seem particularly thrilled to be it, Ty Lee yelled, and then her face brightened and she turned to face Naruto. Naruto could have avoided these because of training to hide oneself from the enemy, but he wanted to be fair to the others and not ruin his cover because that ability is associated with trained warriors. He heard Azula run after him, the dried leaves beneath them crunching with each step, and he turned around when he saw the determined spark in her eyes. He then ran into the dense forest to avoid being tagged. He hadn't seen Mai since the beginning, but he assumed it was because she was so good at blending in. She had always told stories about hiding from her mother and nannies when they tried to dress her up as a typical Fire Nation noble, and he saw Zuko running away from his sister needlessly to his right as she was determined to catch him, not seeing her brother as an easy target compared to himself. Naruto felt like a typical child for once. He stumbled as he glanced over his shoulder and saw Azula running toward him with a frightful expression on her face. Naruto perspired before he began to run more quickly. She had that expression that men dreaded, the one they made when you got into trouble and you would die if you were caught. Naruto winced at the memory, knowing that Azula wouldn't hurt him, but that face made you want to run. He heard Azula curse, turned abruptly, and sped up. He had witnessed his mother give his father that look before, and it didn't work out well for Minato. Naruto, return here. Naruto complained to himself, there's no way in hell when you're looking like that. Kid, tell me about it. Nibi had previously given me that look, and the woman once again demonstrated her strength regardless of how many tails she had. Kyuubi shuddered. At the sudden voice in his head, Naruto stumbled over a stump, then rolled on the ground and resumed his cheetah pace. Kyuubi, stunned, he yelled in his head, damn it, stop that. Ah, but it's a lot of fun, Kit, gosh darn it. Is there any way to speak with your teacher, Kyuubi, the Great Spirit, who possesses unrivaled power? Yes. Before Kyuubi said a single word that Naruto unconsciously followed, he complained about something incomprehensible. Duck. When the Fire Nation princess let out a cry of rage, Naruto did indeed duck, causing Azula to sail over his head and fall to the ground. He looked incredulously, then turned and ran back the way they had come, sweat dropping once more. When did tag become a game where getting caught meant death? Whoa. Jiraiya would kill to have such a cute girl chasing after him, Kyuubi said, letting out a fox-like whistle. She's a little spitfire, she is. Before realizing how frightening it was, he would enjoy it. In addition, that would make him a pedophile, and I doubt he would allow that to damage his reputation. You don't sound too confident in him. Sad part is you're 100% correct. Sadly, he was on top of a steep hill and began to tumble down, interrupting his mental conversation with the spirit. He heard a feminine gasp and clutched his tackler to his chest to protect her as they tumbled and bounced down the hill. He grunted when his back slammed hard at the bottom, pebbles and sharp plants digging into his back, and he shifted uneasily and opened his eyes to see who he was holding. He smiled, mildly amused, then put a gentle hand on her head and said, Azula, it's okay. He was surprised to see that she was lying on top of him, clutching his shirt with closed eyes and trembling fists. You're secure. Unaware that she was straddling the blonde, she opened her eyes, sat up, and looked around in shock. She gasped when she saw his face and body, his clothes ripped from the thorns and twigs he had protected her from, and she scowled. How are you? Not that I mind, but how long are you going to stay like that? He asked, nodding and smiling nervously. She looked up into his face with a determined expression, and he raised an eyebrow as she leaned closer to his face and his eyes widened. She blinked and looked down, her face lighting up like the flames she controlled, and he could almost see the steam coming from her ears. She isn't, oh, you lucky bastard Kit. It wasn't that he hadn't noticed Azula's beauty. On the contrary, he was immediately struck by how much of a work of art she was. Her stunning amber eyes and chocolate-colored hair captivated him, and he closed his eyes, waiting for something he knew they would both like. A tiny flush appeared under his eyes as he felt her breath on his face. He licked his lips nervously, but as their lips were about to meet, he coughed, causing Azula to jump back off him and regain her composure, while Naruto continued to appear slightly shocked. Alongside them were a furious Tai Li, a giggling Zuko, and a laughing Mai. Azula got to her feet, her face still flushed despite her best efforts to appear dignified, and said simply, well, you're it, Naruto. He gave her a golden eyebrow before grinning and saying, all right, get everyone running. He had no intention of being it for very long. He scowled as the others dispersed, realizing that he couldn't interfere with the princess of the Fire Nation because their nations were at war and doing so would only lead to problems. What's bothering you? Ursa inquired as she entered the dining room and noticed Ozai tapping his fingers on the hard surface he was resting on. He only did this when he was upset. Someone broke into the jail last night, all right? The intruder spoke with the Iron Maiden before leaving when more guards came. The Iron Maiden. Ursa's eyes grew wide. How did they enter? It's among the safest spots in the prisons. Even a mouse cannot enter without being detected. Ozai reluctantly acknowledged, someone powerful. He knew that this invader could have saved the Iron Maiden, but why didn't he? He also didn't want someone as powerful on the other side of the war, and he was planning to become the Fire Lord soon and didn't want such a weak security when he's in charge. Ozai? He shook his head. Ursa raised an eyebrow, surprised to see Zuko snickering in Azula's face as red as a tomato, and opened her mouth to speak again when her two children returned. What's the matter? Zuko's chuckles became full-fledged laughter as Azula's face brightened even more. Azula attempted to kiss Naruto. ZZU, stop talking. Don't refer to me that way. Ursa was shocked, not surprised, that Azula had attempted to kiss a boy. She was not sure whether she should be happy or shocked that Azula had at last shown interest in a boy, and she felt almost sorry for him. It would be difficult to deal with an Azula who had a crush. Even she, the girl's own mother, could hardly manage a typical Azula. We were playing tag and the two tripped and fell down a cliff. Azula landed on top. Zuzu, quit. Avoid cocking me that. Then, before she could plant a kiss on his lips, Tai Li stepped in. You ought to have seen his astonished expression. He chuckled before Azula's hands flared with blue-tinted fire and began frantically pursuing him. Would you take a look at that, then? Ursa said. Azula really likes someone? Ozai was strangely silent as he skipped back into his temporary home. Naruto was beaming. He had a great time today and had a mind-blowing experience that left him speechless. He did like Azula and thought she was beautiful, but he knew that he couldn't have her until the war was over, so he started spending as much time as he could with her because he had at least a week left. His eyes widened as he saw an oddly serious and irate Jiraiya packing the last of his belongings into an overstuffed bag, shattering that hope when he entered the tiny house and found everything packed. Jiraiya? He didn't use his nickname for the perverted old man. Something was wrong. He'd never seen the old man so serious or angry before. What's wrong? You're packing, but why? We're leaving. What? When? Now? What? His eyes widened. We've only been here for 2 weeks, though a month, you said. At least we have a week left. This is important. What could possibly be so significant? Not now, brat. With a growl, Naruto stomped his foot on the floor and said, Jiraiya, tell me now, or must I give you an order? I must know the reason for our hasty departure? Jiraiya gave the blonde boy a fierce look and said, You want to know? Okay, I'll tell you. We came because my spies informed me that there was a good chance a Lightning Empire soldier would be tortured and held captive by the Fire Nation. Sadly, it is true. With the worst person imaginable, I came here to find out if it was true. It's unbelievable that they believe they can get away with this. The insolence, the haughtiness. Who do they have to infuriate you so much, Jiraiya? I don't think, the man said, his eyes softening. Ero-sensei, with a sigh, he seized Naruto and embraced him tightly, saying, It's your aunt, Princess Amaya Namikaze. Naruto's eyes widened. His aunt had vanished years before while on a recon mission. How could she have been taken by the Fire Nation while in its capital, Ba Sing Se, disguised as an Earth Kingdom citizen? His aunt was tortured, and he became enraged at the Fire Nation and Jiraiya. He searched Jiraiya's face for any indication of deceit, but he found none. He felt a tear fall down his cheek before wiping it away. Why didn't you come to her aid? I'm sure you could have. She wouldn't let me, but I could have. I didn't want to add to the already existing commotion as the guards were approaching. She instructed me to leave her and to give Minato a message. He apologized, saying, sorry, he wasn't one to make such snap judgments. What did Aunt Amaya say? The king is now no more than a puppet. The king? Is that the king of Earth? Probably, but we have to go now. If we move quickly, we can cross the border by midnight. Wait, let me leave a message. Jiraiya sighed and scowled, saying, I won't hold it against you if you reveal your true identity to them. Just use caution. It was time for a farewell, and Naruto nodded. The four gazed in shock at what they saw. What had been Naruto's house and shop just 24 hours before, now with a big, closed, sign on it and everything bare. Zuko's eyes were wide, Mai scowled, and Azula and Tai Li looked positively heartbroken. The inside was as empty as the outside, with not a single piece of trash on the floor or in the garbage, as if Naruto, his teacher, had never been there. Tai Li shook her head as she hurried in, followed by Azula, Mai, and Zuko. Zuko abruptly said, There's a note. Glancing over to the table, the four hurried over and swiftly opened it, reading it with heavy hearts. Sure enough, there was a single scroll rolled up onto it. Hello everyone, I apologize for the short notice, but I must leave. Ero-sensei surprised me by dropping the bomb the moment I returned, and I'm leaving for home now that he's finished what needs to be done. And I'm not who you think I am. I'm not from a Fire Nation colony, and I don't even have a sister. I'm not Fire Nation at all. My name is Naruto Namikaze, and I'm the prince and heir to the Lightning Empire's throne. Minato Namikaze is my father. I spent some of my best days with you four, and I wouldn't trade them for anything, but since our countries are at war, I have to grudgingly say that this won't work out. And before you start wondering if everything we had together was a lie, it wasn't. We're on different sides for the time being, but I'm sorry. I'll miss you all. I'll never forget what we did together. If this war ends during our lifetime, maybe we'll see each other again. Always your friend, Naruto Namikaze. Prince. The four were frozen in shock as they gazed at the scroll with wide eyes. Naruto was a prince of the Lightning Empire. The children's few tears were the only sound to break the deafening silence. Ero-sensei, do you know something? As he leaned against the edge of the Lightning Empire ship from which they flee the Fire Nation, Naruto asked softly, his face strangely neutral as he stared off toward the Fire Nation. What, jerk? While gazing up at the sky, Jiraiya pondered how he would break the news of his sister to Minato. You never did teach me anything like you promised. The blonde prince turned to Jiraiya, Grinning sorrowfully, some would say he appeared to be about to cry, but lightning princes never cry. Knowing how to make the boy smile, Jiraiya laughed and said, "Well, I'll train you so hard your ass will fall off when we get back to the Empire." Naruto, 14, was walking down the elegantly decorated halls of the royal castle, and he was relieved to see the Fire Nation gang because they treated him like a prince. Yes, he had friends in the Lightning Empire who did not treat him like a prince, but this was different. They didn't know he was a prince, but they did. It was hard for him to believe that it had been 2 years since he had last seen them. He frequently pondered how those four felt, and he knew how he felt. Guilty. He felt terrible about leaving them and lying to them, but he knew that it was necessary, particularly since 2 of them were the children of the now current Fire Lord. He couldn't have simply approached them and said, "I'm the Prince of the Lightning Empire, so please take care of me." If he had managed to escape the country without being caught, he would have been reprimanded, and they wouldn't have discovered that they welcomed Princess Amaya. The night he was told, Minato was strangely silent for about a minute before he let out a shriek of rage and jumped up from his throne, and he and his mother had to run up to him and hold him back from leaving the throne room while brave guards peeked in to see what the scream was, only to have his mother tell him to let no one in or out. A smile crept onto his lips when his mind turned to his father. Jiraiya had prostrated himself onto the ground, knowing that objects were going to start flying, and told the Emperor about his sister while Naruto plastered himself against the wall. Minato had been spewing colorful words and sentences out of his mouth that caused the other people in the room to blush or frown. He wanted to take an army and infiltrate the Fire Nation and reclaim his sister, especially after learning that she was being tortured. However, Kushina began to argue with him about how doing so would result in needless deaths, and Amaya wouldn't be pleased about that. She told him that they could send strong spies and have them infiltrate the Fire Nation to rescue her when security is lax because the Lightning Empire didn't want war, even if it was to save their beloved princess. Furthermore, security hasn't gotten any easier after 2 years. The spies claim that they're all still on edge following Jiraiya's break-in and that it will take some time before they can successfully complete the rescue mission. Minato had once again begun to babble about going on his own, but Kushina had reiterated that he was needed here and that his sister would be rescued nevertheless. Minato sent another spy, just in case, as he put it. It was ironic that the Namikaze men, who preferred to be passive most of the time, wanted to spill blood while their "I want to spill blood everyday" woman didn't. Naruto couldn't blame him. He wanted to do the same, to storm the Fire Nation and reclaim his aunt. However, Kushina and Sora were the voice of reason, and he realized that 2 of the most violent women in the Empire didn't want violence. He would have pointed that out if he hadn't known that they were correct. When he thought of his return 2 years ago, he shivered. Sora had not been pleased with him. He had never run so quickly in his life. After all, who wouldn't flee from your blade-loving fiancé who was charging at you with her sharpened sword swinging from left to right? He moaned every time he thought of that incident. Phantom pains would go through his body. Naruto shuddered at the thought of Jiraiya having also kept his promise to train his ass off. Rewind. The training grounds were strewn with craters and pieces of wood from fallen trees, and Naruto fell to the ground, panting heavily, shirtless, his chest slashed and burned. "Not just yet, brat, can't you get it right?" While his pupil was stranded in the intense heat, Jiraiya reprimanded from beneath one of the few remaining trees, cool from the shade. The blonde panted and struggled to sit up, saying, "It's not that simple. All you need to do is shape your Rasengan using Kyuubi's abilities," the white-haired man said, looking up from what he was likely writing for his perverted book series. "It shouldn't be too difficult to shape lightning with fire. A little lightning is even useful for firebenders." "Then give it a shot," Naruto yelled. "You forget that I can't use fire, but I would if I could." "Be quick, brat, so we can try to shape your fire with the Chidori, and the sooner I can eat," Jiraiya said, laughing. "How about me?" Jiraiya chirped, "No food until you succeed." Since he hadn't eaten breakfast and it was already close to 2, the boy moaned, "Damn you, Ero-sensei. Brat, don't call me that. I still fail to understand why I must do this. You're going to need it eventually. Brat, you need to make the most of the powerful abilities Kyuubi gave you. You must at least learn how to control and combine your abilities, regardless of whether you prefer lightning bending and will use it most of the time." Kyuubi, who had been quiet all day, said, "He's right, Kit," as a sign of support. "Now get up and try again." With a groan, Naruto stood up, stumbling on his stinging legs, pleading with him to sit down and rest them. With a flick of his wrist, the Rasengan materialized in his hand, spinning wildly with lethal lightning. "Add the fire now, and that's it. Make an effort to let it follow the lightning. It ought to." Bang! When he added the fire, the Rasengan exploded again, sending Naruto flying back to the ground, and he groaned in agony as he discovered another burn on his forearm. "Make fireworks, I guess," Jiraiya sighed. "Give it another go." However, Arrow Sennin, we've been working on this for hours, and the only possible result is that it will blow up every time I get hurt. After letting out another sigh, the white-haired man said, "Tell you what, I'll treat you to ramen when you get it right." The head of Naruto jerked up from the floor. Ramen? Yes. Really? Yes. How much? As much as you can eat and as long as I don't go broke. In an instant, Naruto stood up, a Rasengan already forming in his right palm, and he gazed at it for a moment before closing his eyes. Brat, what are you doing? Silence. With a sigh, Jiraiya began to complain under his breath about brats these days, and no respect for their elders. Naruto slowed his breathing and concentrated on the sensation of the lightning, memorizing its flow, sensation, rhythm, and spin before he began to slowly introduce fire into it. As the Rasengan grew to about twice its normal size, with flames and lightning occasionally shooting out from the ball of power, Jiraiya sat there, staring intently as Naruto's blue lightning began to turn red. Not the usual red and yellow lightning he used normally, but a fiery red, as he suspected the Kyuubi's influence was to blame. Naruto opened his eyes, looked down, and jumped up when he saw his accomplishment. Yes, Arrow Sennin, I succeeded. Jiraiya smiled at Naruto and then shook his head. He would have used ramen hours earlier if he had known it would help the boy succeed. Well, now let's try the Chidori. Jiraiya's eyes widened in horror as the modified Rasengan hit the ground, and Naruto's smile turned to a frown as it fell from his hand. Nothing happened for a few seconds before a huge explosion shook the castle. Well done. The end of the flashback. After quickly putting out the Chidori mixed with fire, Naruto smiled and was taken to ramen after receiving a reprimand from Jiraiya, which he obviously ignored in order to pay for the torture and reprimand. He sucked the man's wallet dry. Fun times. Naru. A youthful voice yelled when a 2-year-old redhead rushed towards Naruto at full speed. He turned around and grinned softly. The girl tacked his legs, and he knelt down and hugged her tiny body, ruffling her long hair and making her laugh. Nana, how are you? Nana grinned broadly. Well done, she chirped. My prince, oh. As she turned the corner, Nana's nanny cried out, I'm sorry, she. Isn't she a little spitfire? She does this to everyone, so don't worry, he said, laughing and completing her sentence for her even big brother. She nodded and giggled as he smiled down at her. Nana was already a sight to behold at the age of 2. Her eyes were the same shade of chocolate brown as Amaya's, and her hair was a bloody red that matched her mother's. Naruto would always feel sad when he looked into those eyes, and he knew that his parents were no different. Minato had once remarked that if you change the red hair to blonde, you'd have Amaya at 2 years old. He was using a sister while in the Fire Nation, so naturally, Naruto was shocked and found it somewhat amusing when Kushina and Minato broke the news to their son after the little incident involving Amaya. Naruto still recalled the shock he experienced upon returning home 2 years ago, and he had a good laugh with Jiraiya following the initial shock. The fact that dolls would now be a daily occurrence would depress most boys, but Naruto didn't care. All he wanted was to see her smile and ensure that what happened to Amaya never happened to her. Naruto wasn't ashamed to admit that he doted on his younger sister. So, what can you get today from your big brother? Isn't Naru going to see Papa? Naruto nodded while silently praising her better vowel usage. She still couldn't say, Naruto, for God knows what reason, but her speech was getting better. Can Nana go with Naru? Obviously. He looked at the nanny and said, Thank you for the day's work, miss, before getting up and holding the happy girl's hand. The young woman blushed and nodded, then turned around and hurried away to cover up her blush and embarrassment. It was my pleasure. Naru? Yes. What prompted a guard to call Nana Amaya? I'm not Amaya. Nana is Nana. After a brief pause, he accelerated a little. Amaya is our aunt, Nana. Aside from her hair color, she looks exactly like you, he replied truthfully, never lying to his younger sister. Aunt? Why hasn't Nana met her aunt? She asked, smiling. With a sorrowful gaze, Naruto said, Aunt Amaya is being held prisoner, Nana. Prisoner? Prisoner, Nana? That was Nana's statement. Why? She said, puffing up her pink cheeks. It's difficult to describe because she is a member of the Lightning Empire. She is being held captive even though they don't know who she really is. They can still keep her in captivity because she's from here. Nana doesn't understand, Naru, Nana said, cocking her head to the side. Remind Nana. With a laugh, the blonde prince said, You'll understand when you're older. The 2-year-old pouted and huffed like a child, saying, No one ever tells Nana anything. As he swooped down and lifted the joyfully screaming girl and laid her on his shoulders, Naruto's lips formed a smile, and she continued to giggle for a few more minutes before tapping the top of his head. Naru. To the ball? Am I a horse? Yes. Well then, we'll go to the ball after we meet with mom and dad. Congratulations. Naruto laughed again. Nana had always wanted to attend the nobles' gatherings in the ballroom, even if half of them were just social and political discussions and not dances. Naruto would never understand this because he hated going to those places and listening to those old coots talk endlessly about something he had heard before, but from a different angle. And all those women, he shivered whenever there was a ball of some kind. Almost every woman wanted to dance with him, and in order to keep them happy, he had to dance with every single one of them. Fortunately, she wasn't old enough for boys to be interested in her yet. Not that he'd let any boys near her, for that matter. He growled at the idea of men staring at his little sister that way, and he dreaded the day when she was older. She would undoubtedly be as beautiful as any woman born into the royal line, and he would be beating the men off with a stick every hour. There was no way in hell that would ever happen while he was still alive. Naru, why do you sound like such a grumpy little girl? He muttered angrily, just thinking about the future. He was already plotting terrible things to do to anyone who even glanced at her. Men from all over the empire knew that male namikazes were always protective of their siblings, sometimes to an obsessive degree, but they still flocked to the girls, suffered terrible tragedy and agony, and then tried again and again. When they arrived at the large double doors, Naruto lifted his sister off his shoulders and laid her gently on the marble floor next to him. She reached up and took his hand with her small one, and the guards on either side of the doors nodded, pushed the doors open, and the two entered. The room had a dome-like ceiling supported by tall pillars, with a large glass circle near the center of the ceiling that showed the blue sky and stars at night, 4 thrones near the very back, and stained glass windows lining the walls that told the stories of the Biju and dragons. Toward the back of the room were open balconies to overlook the empire. Are you two here, Dad and Mom? Naruto shouted. As the emperor and his queen returned to the room from one of the balconies, the emperor's voice echoed, "Ah, you're here, and little Nana is with you, I see." "Papa, Mama." Nana jumped joyfully and squealed as she approached her mother, who was happy to pick her up and give her a forehead kiss. Minato smiled at his wife and daughter and said, "I didn't expect to see her here." "She and I met in the hallways." With a laugh, Naruto remarked, "She fled from her nanny once more." Minato laughed. "Just like you when you were younger, only we couldn't find nor catch you." After blushing a little, Naruto composed himself and said, "You wanted to talk to me? We have lost contact with our spies in the Fire Nation capital." Minato's once cheerful expression also turned serious. Naruto squinted and motioned for him to go on. "Jiraiya has gone to take a look, but I doubt he'll find anything without raising suspicion." He took a deep breath and rubbed his neck. "Your mother and I have talked and we've agreed to do the one thing we've been trying to avoid. War." Naruto closed his eyes. "It is unacceptable to kidnap my sister, a princess of the Lightning Empire," Minato said with a sorrowful nod. "I attempted to approach this in a way that would not cause harm to anyone, but at this point, there is no other option. When? This will be done in a discreet manner until you turn 16, we will continue to assemble allies outside of the empire. What about the soldiers? We won't be sending out many. We're going to find their weakness, take advantage of it, save my sister, and use it as a backup. I'm going to send you along because I don't want many deaths on my head." "Me? Yes, whether you like it or not, being an emperor requires you to be skilled in combat, Naruto. I'm growing older, and my strength is waning. I've outlived my prime." "You're 50, Dad," Naruto remarked. "You can still fight." Neither Minato nor Kushina appeared to be his age. Instead, they appeared to be in their 30s, which is a blessing that few people were given because they struggled to conceive. Minato and Kushina had Naruto later in life, and when they announced they were expecting another child, he was shocked. "Yeah, but I am older now. I want you prepared for the day when you will leave the empire." With a nod, Naruto said, "Anything else?" "Yes, you'll need to meet certain requirements for some of the alliances." Minato nodded as Naruto said, "Marriage." Enko and Kurenai were wonderful mother figures, but they didn't live long past his 7th birthday due to a plague that ravaged the empire at the time. Naruto always knew that the day would come when he would have to marry a girl for political reasons. His father had done so before, but they were sadly no longer alive. Rewind. "The birthday brat is there. Happy birthday, kid," Enko exclaimed, embracing Naruto like a bear. "I'm not a child." Naruto pouted and pried himself out of the woman's arms, growling. Minato was forced into a marriage with Enko in order to keep them loyal. Enko was a beautiful woman with violet hair pulled up in a somewhat spiky ponytail, and her eyes were light brown and pupilless, making you stop and stare into them every time. The Mitarashi clan was, at best, shaky on loyalty. Naruto frowned as she made fun of him, saying, "Of course you're not." Kurenai knelt down and gave him a tender embrace, saying, "Stop making fun of him. Anko, how old are you now?" 7. With pride, he declared, 7. She smiled at him. What a mature boy. Her father forced her into a marriage with Minato to secure their position as nobles for a very long time, and it was not surprising that Minato married her because losing the Yuhi clan would be a pain in the empire's side. For a very long time Kurenai was the exception to the rule of the Yuhi nobles, who were all exotic looking, with black hair and red eyes, and were conceited. "Kurenai, don't act like an adult around a brat." Anko smiled. "He's still a baby." "Anko!" Kurenai yelled at the girl, who gave a shrug. Naruto slouched and his pout widened, saying, "Mama says I'm a big boy." The red-eyed beauty slapped Anko in the head after teasing, "All mothers say that, brat." "Naruto, don't pay attention to her." Anko is a complete moron. "Hey, who can't go a day without stepping on someone's pride?" "Well, it's enjoyable." Turning to Naruto, Anko complained, "And you're still a kid." She pulled out a knife when Naruto stuck his tongue out at her. "If you don't put that organ away, I'll cut it off," she laughed. Kurenai glared at Anko, grabbed the knife from the girl, and put her hands on her hips before saying, "No knives." Naruto swallowed and ran behind Kurenai, peeking out from behind her legs. "But Kurenai, why do you take away my toys every time?" The girl with the violet hair whined like a kid. "And you call Naruto a kid? You're so mean, Kurenai." Anko pouted. She turned to Naruto and grinned, saying, "No, that's you. Where are Kushina and Minato?" "They are busy," Naruto said. Lowering his gaze, "They said they could join me in celebrating when they were finished, but I'm not sure when that will be." Even though they were aware of how difficult it was to be the emperor and queen, the two scowled. "How about some cake, brat?" Anko pointed to the enormous 4-layered cake and asked. "And gifts?" Kurenai said with a soft smile. Naruto's expression brightened. "Yes." The end of the flashback. That was the last time he saw them healthy before they contracted the plague, and a sorrowful smile appeared on his face. It was ironic that the plague disappeared 2 months after they passed away. Just 2 months, and they could have survived. When Minato and Kushina were busy, they would be there to look after him. They were like mothers to him. "To whom am I getting married?" "I've gotten into contact with the Northern Water Tribe, and the tribal chief agreed for an alliance on the condition you marry his daughter, Princess Yu." "What is her age?" "She's 2 months younger than you, 14. You will spend a few days getting to know your bride and will meet her as soon as possible. She will be of marriageable age when she turns 16, so you must go back to the Northern Water Tribe to bring her here." "When should I depart?" Naruto said, "I understand. Right away. They're anticipating your arrival." "Mama, is Naru heading somewhere?" Nana inquired. Kushina grinned and said, "He is." Frowning, she said, "But Nana will miss him." "Don't worry, he won't be gone long, won't Naru?" "I won't," Naruto said, grinning at his younger sister. "I swear." With a frown on her face, 12-year-old Azula marched through the castle. Her brother had recently been exiled, and she was not as happy as she had expected to be. Yes, she was glad of his exile and had watched with sadistic delight as he was burned, but she couldn't help but miss him a little. She didn't blame him for keeping his secret. Even though he was a prince of a different country, it still hurt that he had kept it from her. Shortly after her mother disappeared and her father became the Fire Lord, his absence reminded her of Naruto and had an impact on everyone. Speaking of her father, he was a little shocked when he first learned who Naruto was, but then he developed lust for power. She had told him that she really liked him, and she didn't expect her father to support her love, but he actually encouraged it. "Azula, get stronger and pull him back here. Persuade him to unite the nations and establish a global power." With a sly and reflective grin, he had said, "If not, drag him back in chains until he sees it your way." She trained to become stronger, turning her fire into a pure electric blue, and now she was working on the little lightning that a firebender had. The Namakazes were strong, so she needed to be even stronger to drag him back. She knew her father only wanted the Lightning Empire in his hands, but she didn't care as long as she got Naruto. Remembering Tai Li, she confessed her love for him after Naruto left. At first, Azula was upset and ready to break off their friendship, but Mai talked her into it. Since Naruto was a prince and princes typically marry more than one woman for political reasons, Azula eventually gave in, but she made it clear that she would be the dominant woman. The two always had competitions, somehow turning everything into a game where the winner is a better this or that. For Naruto, Mai and Zuko had said it was getting to absurd proportions. She wished she had kissed him the night before he left, but she had let it go because she had intended to kiss him again but never had the opportunity. He disappeared the following day, and she made a self-promise to kiss him the next time she saw him, whether he was on the enemy side or not. Additionally, it bothered her and Ozai that the Iron Maiden was smiling more frequently, which likely had something to do with the increased security because someone had broken in, which was the only reason they were able to catch the spies. Regretfully, the guards had killed 2 of them, and one of them had committed suicide in order to avoid speaking before being questioned, and they were punished appropriately. But why was the Iron Maiden so vital to the Lightning Empire? She might have been of noble blood, which would explain the secrecy, or she might have been royalty, since they would have already stormed the place in an attempt to reclaim her. When her thoughts returned to the Empire, she stopped. Naruto most likely had a fiancé. After all, who wouldn't have approached him already? He was a prince, kind, strong, and attractive. All qualities that women seek in a man. She felt fire form in the palms of her hands. If he did, she would burn that woman to ashes. After she let the fire go, she turned around and headed for the training grounds, knowing that she needed to get much stronger in order to attract Naruto's attention and win his return. As Naruto stepped off the ship he had been on for a week, Tribal Chief Arnok smiled and said, "Welcome, Prince Naruto Namikaze." Naruto gave him a nod. "I assume this is Tribal Chief Arnok?" "Arnok will be alright, please, after all, I will be your father-in-law." With a smile, Naruto said, "Of course." As he guided Naruto through the icy streets, Arnok said, "This way." "I am sorry you've been forced into this, but this was an opportunity I couldn't miss." He said, "I had to make the alliance last after the Empire contacted me about it." "Don't worry, I totally get it. I won't hold it against you because you did what you had to do most of the time. Rulers have to make difficult decisions and sacrifices." "That is absolutely accurate, sage advice from a young person," Arnok remarked. "War does not spare the young, Arnok. I'm still happy you came," the tribal chief said softly. "Unfortunately, I was having trouble finding suitable partners for my daughter's marriage. I was worried that I would have to propose to her." "Han? He is one of our young, powerful warriors. I think he's a year older than you." With a golden eyebrow, Naruto said, "So, what made you feel afraid?" "I worry about what might happen to the northern tribe. Han's ability to wield a dagger like an adult makes him conceited, egotistical, and self-centered. I was also worried about my daughter's future. He pursues her even though he is fully aware of her feelings for him. However, he would have been my only option if you hadn't agreed." "No matter the nation," Naruto scowled and said, "I understand that you as your only child, having someone like that on the throne would not go well." "Yes, she is. Then who will run the tribe when you retire?" As they ascended the stairs to the ice palace, Arnok chuckled. "My wife is miraculously with child. She's a wonderful woman. It's the only reason we can do this arrangement. The child shall inherit the tribe and hopefully there'll be more competent people his or her age to help them run the tribe." Naruto grinned. "I have a little sister." Arnok arched an eyebrow and peered over his shoulder. "Oh? She's a little spitfire. We don't know if she's a lightning bender yet, but we're guessing. We've found her room burnt many times, not to mention she's a handful." He chuckled. "Just today she ran away from her nanny again. It seems like she only listens to me and our parents, though the obedience doesn't last long." Arnok laughed. "How old is she?" He frowned, which made Arnok laugh harder. "2 and already a heartbreaker. I'm dreading the day when I'll have to pick up sticks on the side of the road as a weapon against those animals." The tribal leader halted abruptly. "Ah, we're here." Naruto's expression was filled with surprise as he looked up. It was entirely composed of ice in what little light there was. It was lovely and glittered. He allowed a smile to appear on his face. He teasingly said, "Nice place if you don't like the sun." Arnok laughed and shook his head. "We don't get enough of it, I say. Are you ready to meet my daughter? Any time is as good of the next. Follow me. You must be tired after your long journey." "Yes, sleeping on a boat isn't what one would call comfortable." Naruto observed his surroundings as he followed the tribal chief. He simply couldn't fathom spending your entire life in ice, no matter how lovely it was. With a shiver, he drew his jacket tighter around him. He was not accustomed to such environments with the exception of the vicinity of the Nagato Mountains, where snowfall occurs more frequently. The Lightning Empire was a warm region with little snowfall. How these people didn't freeze to death was beyond him. "Chief Arnok, sir," a young man who was somewhat attractive said as he walked up to the person he was speaking to. He was proud and held himself in high regard. Naruto estimated that he was at least a year older than him. "Ah, hello Han, I hope you're well." "That's Han, then." "What an ugly boy." Even Naruto did not wink. Some girls think the opposite. "Damn, you didn't jump. Take away my fun, why don't you?" "I'm getting used to it." "Don't get used to it. If you pop up randomly every time, of course I'm going to get used to it." Fuzzball. Kyuubi sighed. "What else am I going to do? Send you a card saying I'm going to speak to you at this time on this day? Of course not. I'll talk to you when I want and where I want without any regard to what you're doing. As a great spirit, am more important than a lowly flesh bag of a mortal. Kid. Kid, are you listening to me? I just slaughtered an entire village, I murdered your sister in cold blood. What? Finally, you answer. Why weren't you listening? Well, I stopped listening around sending me a card because I wasn't in the mood to listen to you blather now. If you haven't noticed, I'm busy. Kyuubi complained and fell silent, saying, touchy. Arnuk said, what can I do for you? I was wondering if you knew where Princess Yu is. I want to speak to her about the future, Han inquired. The tribal leader's lips quirked, and Naruto laughed to himself. He enjoyed putting people in their proper place and putting them down. He meant it in a, it's funny, way rather than a haughty, I'm better than you, way. Ah, yes, I was going to talk to her about marriage arrangements as well. Han's eyes widened, then a smug grin crept onto his lips as he eyed Naruto as if he were a gamer in dirt. Sir, I would be honored to be engaged to your daughter. I will. Who said it was you? Arnuk asked the 15-year-old, whose eyes widened and remained so, with a hard but amused eyebrow. I'm sorry. I haven't told the tribe yet, but I've already decided on Yu's husband and have discussed it with her. But, sir, if not me then who? Arnuk grinned. Han, meet Naruto Namikaze, Crown Prince of the Lightning Empire and the one to wed my daughter. He hissed, jealously forgetting whose company he was in. This boy is going to marry you. But sir, I'm the best for the throne. Arnuk yelled, you are arrogant. Which made Han jump. You shall leave with Naruto on her 16th birthday and my unborn child shall inherit the tribe. You, Han, will not come. Naruto, it's time for you to meet Yu. Naruto did something he couldn't help doing as they passed the enraged Han. He grinned. It wasn't just any smirk, though. It was the same one Han had given him just a minute before. It was a, I'm better than you. IWN grin that was intended to hit him as the two vanished down another hall. The older boy, predictably, channeled all of his hatred into a single glare. I'm sorry for the boy's insolence, it shall be taken care of. Naruto laughed and said, no, it's fine. It was actually quite entertaining. The faces he made were enough for me. Still, I apologize for the boy's behavior, it's quite alright. They turned and began to move into a cavern, away from the palace when Naruto noticed the lovely oasis in the middle of a wide opening. His eyes grew wide. A stunning white-haired girl was kneeling in the center, gazing up into a tiny, glistening pond. She looked back down and blushed shyly when she saw them. The Biju King teased, wow, I'm jealous kid. Shut up, Kyuubi. Arnuk turned around and said, I hope you two get along. You're leaving? You cannot bond well with me staring over your shoulders, can you? Naruto's eyebrow went up. I'm a growing teenage boy in puberty alone with a white-haired beauty. It's like you're asking me to do something. Is he asking you to finish that sentence? And I don't care where you are, I'll slice your tongue off so you can never spew such shit again. Kyuubi froze back on his mountain. Arnuk laughed, you won't do anything. Oh, you're not that kind of boy. As he watched the man go, the blonde remarked, very observant, Arnuk. He turned and began walking toward one of the two bridges that connected the small island in the center with the land he was standing on. The girl began to move more as he got closer, giving him a nervous look. He reached her side in a short amount of time. As he knelt beside her, he could see koi fish swimming in the transparent pond. They're pretty. Yeah, I'm Naruto. You, taking her chin gently and turning her to face him, he scowled at her. He gave her a soft smile. It's very nice to meet you, Princess Yu. After blushing and averting her gaze, she recovered and turned back to him. Yes, nice to meet you as well. This is a very brave thing you're doing. She gave a nod. It is for my people. I'll do anything for my people. Besides, you're better than Han any day. Naruto laughed. I had a run-in with him on the way here. He's an ass all right. She laughed. So, are you being forced into this? Not really forced as much as I know that this is my duty. Why? Are you being forced? She gave a headshake. No, I'm doing my duty. It seems that someone else understands. For a prince or princess, duty to their people is the most important. We would lay down our lives so that they could live. Unfortunately, not everyone sees that, and some kingdoms have lost that. The Fire Nation, for example. Yu scowled in response. Yes, the whole reason we're having this arrangement. He looked in her direction. I don't want this just to be because of duty. I actually want to get to know you. We Namikazes don't ignore the women in our lives. If I'm going to spend the rest of my life with you, you won't be on the sidelines. She turned red. I'd like that, Naruto. Reaching into his coat, he said, and here, he took out a necklace and said, I know this is kind of a tradition for your people, but here, for you. She took it and whispered, a betrothal necklace? It was lovely. It was round, with the Water Tribe emblem on one side and the Lightning Empire swirling. lightning-infested emblem on the other. She began to put it on after blushing. Naruto grabbed the choker from her and secured it around her neck, saying, "Allow me, I hope you like it." She grinned as she touched it. "I do, thank you." Naruto grinned. Arnuk grinned merrily in the darkness, a smile that was almost too big to contain. "You're getting slow with old age, bitch. What did you say?" "You heard me, grandma." As they observed the sword fight between Sora and Kushina, Minato and Naruto shook their heads. Regular practice was always transformed into an Amazonian battle by the two. For years, Sora had been a student of Kushina, and they were always in close proximity. They may have nearly identical personalities, which could be the issue. Turning away from the battle the guards were avoiding, the Emperor asked, "So, you're heading off to get Princess Yu tomorrow, correct?" "Yes." 2 months after turning 16, Naruto began to feel as though his burdens were mounting. In addition to training and instruction, Minato had begun to include his son in discussions and meetings with the generals regarding the strategy for rescuing Amaya. Their spars demonstrated that the Emperor was getting older. The man was going more slowly. He was scheduled to depart today in order to return Princess Yu to the Empire on her 16th birthday. He recalled their first encounter. He acknowledged that they were initially very bashful around one another as they both tried to figure out how to have this special relationship work out smoothly. Something more developed between them over time. The idea of seeing her again caused a flush to creep onto his face. "I've heard the Avatar is heading that way as well." After removing his blush, Naruto turned to face his father and raised an eyebrow. "The Avatar? He's probably heading there to find a waterbending teacher. Who does he think he is? Disappearing for 100 years, then walking back and saying, 'Hey, I need a teacher, give me one.' Oh, the nerve." Minato laughed. "Calm yourself, Naruto. He's supposed to restore the balance. If he was doing his job 100 years ago, then we wouldn't be in this mess." "True, but don't let personal reasons blind your judgment." Naruto gave him a narrowed look. "You're one to talk. When we told you about Aunt Amaya, you were ready to go into a rage-induced massacre in your empire and slaughter your way to the Fire Nation." He raised his arms. "And you tell me not to let personal reasons blind your judgment." Minato's face began to flush a little. He averted his gaze to gather his thoughts, knowing that he had won their brief argument. Naruto's smile grew, and he laughed, which made his father turn and give him a fatherly glare. "Minato. Naruto." The scene in front of them caused the two Namakazes to perspire just a little. With a lock of the other girl's hair in their free hand, both girls held their swords at each other's throats and they were pulling hard. Judging by the faint pain on their angry faces in an attempt to force their way through, each of them had a foot implanted in the other's stomach. "Yes?" they asked hesitantly, prepared to run away if necessary. "Get her off me." After exchanging glances, the two rushed to their girl and pried them free, but in spite of what the women said, they didn't seem to want to lose and didn't let go of the other easily. While Kushina retaliated with her own colorful curses aimed at the younger woman, Naruto held Sora firmly as she kicked and yelled about killing his mother. Naruto began dragging the girl away and said, "Come on, Sora. No, take me back there so I can finish her. You can't kill my mother, Sora." She screamed, struggling fiercely in his iron grip. "I sure as hell can try, let me go. I thought you wanted me to get you away from her." "I did. I wanted you to pull me away from her so I could slaughter her." Pulling her around the corner, he gave up and shook his head. When he finally released him, he discovered purple eyes staring at him and a blade at his neck. She growled, "Why'd you stop the fight? I was just about to end that bitch for good." He raised his hands in submission. "For your information, you made it sound like you wanted the fight to end. Plus, I couldn't have you killing Kushina. She's my mother." Before letting out a sigh and lowering her sword to the sheath on her back, her glare grew more intense. Sora was 16 years old and had matured. She had the body of a goddess, and if they could have at least half of it, many women would kill an army for it. At the intersection of her legs and the rest of her body, her hair came to a halt after flowing down her back. It flowed around her like the aura of a spirit when it was down, but she usually kept it up. As her fiancé sighed and shook his head, she held herself high and declared, "I'll let her live today, but the next time we fight will be her last." "Look, Sora, I have something to tell you. Remember Princess Yu?" She squinted at the perspiring boy and reprimanded, "Ah, she's that water tribe princess that you're engaged to, right? If I remember correctly, you left for over 2 months without telling me anything." He had no immediate plans to flee from his fiancée, who was brandishing a sword. Her fingers itched for her sword, and he gulped, eyeing it wearily. And again, "I'm sorry about that. That's why I'm telling you in advance this time. I'm leaving today to bring her back to the Empire. Please stop reaching for the pointy object on your back," he begged. Her fingers paused an inch from her sword's hilt, then relaxed, bringing her hand back to her side. When she did that, Naruto let out a sigh of relief. At least you told me this time. I still haven't forgiven you for that yet, nor did you tell me when you headed to the Fire Nation for nearly a month, she growled. Naruto began to retreat. Sora, my love, I didn't tell you because I knew you wouldn't have liked me going. You'd have been sad, but if I didn't tell you, you'd have directed anger besides worry and loneliness. I was thinking about you. You think I'd be lonely without you? You think I'd worry about you? Why would I worry about you? If I ever did that, I'd have a heart attack during every completely reckless thing you do. Did I mention you do reckless things on a daily basis? As he began to back up more rapidly, he didn't realize she hadn't commented on the first sentence once more. She was grabbing for her sword. My love, please stop reaching for the sharp object that you use to inflict pain on others, on me. His voice cracked. I really was thinking about you. I just didn't have time to inform you then because we had to leave right away. Ignoring him, she drew her blade. I think I'll be going with you. Going with me? Yes, to make sure nothing happens. He swallowed. He winced as a ruthless gaze entered her eye and said, why, you don't have to. She raised her sword high and said, oh, I want to. With his sword flying in all directions and her right on his heels, Naruto didn't hesitate long to run off. Tonight, Arnuk said to the assembly, rising to his feet and extending his arms, we celebrate the arrival of our brother and sister from the southern tribe. He turned to face his shy sister and brother, who smiled shyly. As his two friends applauded, he gestured to his side, where the arrowed boy timidly raised his hand and waved. And they have brought someone with them, someone very special, someone who was believed to have disappeared from the world until now. The Avatar, he said. Astonished that the Avatar was there, in their city, the crowd began to cheer, as they screamed and whistled. Smiles were a blessing on their faces. The Avatar looked uncomfortable and flushed, shifting his gaze to his two companions for solace. With a smile, he said, we also celebrate my daughter's 16th birthday. He stepped aside to allow his white-haired daughter and her two escorts to approach him from behind. A smile was on her face. It used to be joyful but also had a melancholy undertone. She was glad that the day had arrived, but her blue eyes, which were kind, showed that she was sad for another reason. Arnuk went on to say, Princess Yu is now of marrying age. When Sokka looked around at his sister, he saw the stunning princess, and his eyes grew wide. His mouth fell open, and his sister narrowed her eyes at him. She slapped his shoulder, and he gave her a sheepish look before turning back to the girl. With formality, Yu said, thank you, father. May the great ocean and moon spirits watch over us during these troubled times. He yelled, let's welcome Prince Naruto Namikaze, heir to the Lightning Empire, with open arms when he comes to take my daughter's hand in marriage in a few days. This caused the stadium to erupt in cheers once more. The prospect of seeing Naruto once more made Princess Yu smile. It was painful for her to leave her people, but in a sense, it was her calling as well as her duty. She had to be with him. And the last 2 years had been difficult because she had to leave early and stay for her people. The time had finally arrived, and she was both happy and sad about it. Katara exclaimed, the Prince of the Lightning Empire. As Sokka's expression dimmed, no way. Aang asked, is the Lightning Empire still not in contact with us? Not at all. In fact, since the Fire Nation tried to invade them, they've been even more discreet and locked in. The whispered words, the Fire Nation attacked them, came from Aang. Katara looked at Yu and replied, yes, many times, and have failed in each attempt. It's a wonder why the Lightning Prince is actually marrying her. I mean, she's beautiful, but it's never happened before. Sokka laughed. He's probably some spoiled, whining, weak man who hides behind his title. Sokka. Katara gave him a stern look. You don't even know him. He argued, I know his type, and they're exactly how I described: spoiled, self-centered, whining, ugly, weak. As the applause began to fade, Aang remarked softly, Katara's right, Sokka. You've never met him before, so you don't know him. The monks often complimented their great leadership as they have yet to have fallen and have yet to have been swayed. That was 100 years ago, Aang. People change. His sister hissed, Sokka, what's gotten into you? He instantly regretted saying, nothing, I'm just trying to protect the princess. Katara's expression grew arrogant. Oh, I see you've become smitten with the princess by just her looks. I didn't know you were that kind of person, Sokka. He gave her a scowl. I'm not, she just seems nice, so. Maybe we should protect the princess from you instead. Arnuk's voice echoed through the stadium once more before he could say anything more. And now Master Paku and his students will perform, he said, pointing to a platform in front of a waterfall where two younger men were positioned facing an older man. Katara and Aang were beaming broadly as they clapped as the three started their elaborate bending with resolve gleaming in their eyes. They looked away after briefly locking eyes. Their master had been located. Yu sat next to Sokka as he stuffed his face with the food in front of him. When he saw this, he leaned in her direction and swiftly swallowed his meal, trying to sound cool for the attractive girl. He said, "Hello, I'm Sokka, Southern Water Tribe." She bowed her head slightly and smiled at him. "It's very nice to meet you." Wondering how to carry on the conversation, the two turned their heads away from one another. "So," Sokka gave a drawl. He exclaimed, You're a princess." And she nodded. "You know, back in my tribe I'm kinda like a prince myself." When Katara heard this, she grinned. She picked up some food in front of her and elegantly placed it in her mouth, asking, "Prince of what?" He turned away from the white-haired royal and yelled at her, "A lot of things." This made her angry. He gestured to the princess with his thumb, saying, "And do you mind? I'm trying to have a conversation here." She smiled and bowed dramatically, saying, "My apologies, Prince Sokka." He turned to face Yu once more after taking a quick look at her. "Well, it looks like I'm going to be in town for a while. I'm thinking we could do an activity together?" he replied sheepishly. She arched an eyebrow. "Do an activity?" Sokka stuffed his face after turning to face forward. When he began to choke, he grabbed his throat and forced it down with a cough. Katara smiled knowingly as she leaned over to him. He glared at her when she said, "Very smooth." Katara scowled at the floor beneath her. How dare he deny her the freedom to bend? They have no right to denigrate women in general. She bet she could easily defeat him if she had a chance. Sokka was staring at the floor as though it were going to melt when she burst into her quarters. She arched an eyebrow. "What's got you all pissed?" He yelled, "I could ask you the same question." After a moment of staring at one another, they sighed. "Teaching girls waterbending is forbidden in the North Pole." "What? Why?" "I don't know, it's just a stupid rule. I mean, how can I protect others while traveling with Aang if I can't bend?" Katara. What's the difference between men and women? In the South Pole we were treated as equals. Why is it so different here? I'm useless without bending." He yelled, "Katara. I can't bend either." When she realized her error, she blushed and turned to face him. "Sorry, Sokka, I just needed that rant." He dismissed it with a wave. "I understand, just next time try to not insult my lack of magic." "Bending, Sokka? Whatever. So, why are you mad?" His face took on a dejected expression. He hissed out the name as if it were sour milk. "I tried asking Princess Yu out again, but she refused me. She said she had to get ready for Prince Naruto's arrival." With a sigh, she took a seat beside her brother. "She's betrothed, Sokka. Only because it's for the alliance. She's marrying him because if she doesn't the alliance wouldn't last." She gave him a pitying glance. "From the look on her face I don't think that's the only reason. I'm sorry, Sokka, I really am." He leaned on his sister's shoulder as his face darkened once more. I don't know." She reached around and began to give him a reassuring back rub. "I understand, it's alright, you'll find the right girl eventually. Yu's taken, but I'm sure you'll find the one someday soon." A tiny smile appeared on his face. "Yeah, sorry." "Sorry for what?" When the two turned around, Aang was standing there, observing them with interest. Katara doubted he was aware of the hint of anger in his eyes from earlier. She gave a headshake. "Nothing, Aang, how'd it go?" With a groan, he fell to the floor. He turned to the side and shook his head, saying, "Terrible. So is the Lightning Empire really that big a deal? Are they that big of a deal? Even if you've been frozen for 100 years, I'm surprised you still haven't heard of them." Sokka sighed. "I don't understand, Aang. The Fire Nation has tried to invade 3 times and have failed each time," Katara replied. "So," his eyes widened as she said, "they never even reached the wall that separates the nations? Plus, they were all taken down by a single person." He yelled, "One person," not believing what he had heard. "The first time they were taken down by Emperor Arashi Namikaze, and the last 2 have been dealt with by Emperor Minato Namikaze." "Wow," he cried, conjuring up images of hideous men. "I wonder if the prince is that strong." Katara glared at Sokka as he said, "Like I said, he's probably just a weak wimp who hides behind his crown. What? He's the prince of one of the most powerful nations in the world. I'd be surprised if he wasn't." "He does have a point," Aang reluctantly acknowledged. She nodded and let out a sigh, acknowledging the possibility. "I wonder how powerful the Avatar would be if he was blessed with lightning bending," she thought. Aang gave a shrug. "With great power comes great responsibility. Even though I think I'd be awesome to lightning bend, I'm also glad that I don't have the ability. 4 elements is enough." He was staring at his hands. He was genuinely afraid of the immense power at his fingertips. Katara had already been harmed by him, and that only involved the element of fire. More than 4 was all he wanted. However, why couldn't the Avatar bend lightning? He was curious to know the answer. He was aware that he was most likely not the only avatar who had the same question, but why couldn't the avatar lightning bend if they were supposed to be the master of all elements? With stars in her eyes, Katara remarked, but wouldn't it be incredible to meet someone like the Orange Flash and the Yellow Flash? I bet they're amazing people. Curious, Aang said, huh? What's this about flashes? Katara slapped Sokka in the head after she sighed, you don't know that either? You see, Aang, Emperor Urashi could disappear in a flash of orange lightning, hence his name, the Orange Flash. With an expression of fascination, the final airbender asked, so Emperor Minato could disappear in a flash of yellow, right? That's cool. Sokka laughed and pictured himself standing at victory with the two Namikaze emperors supporting him. Hell yeah, it is. Just think what it would be like if we had them on our side of the war. The Fire Nation would run with their tail between their legs. Wanting to slap her brother once more, Katara said, like that would happen. They're only involved in this war because the Fire Nation keeps attacking them. They haven't made a move in 100 years, so I doubt they would now. Aang blinked. Wait, they aren't involved in the war? She gave a headshake. They refused. I guess they haven't sent troops or anything out to help us and no one knows why. They could be like the monks, Aang cheerfully proposed. They refused to fight unless they were attacked first. Sokka shook his head at Aang's passive demeanor and remarked, I seriously doubt that Aang people who hold that kind of power don't get it just by practice. Besides, I don't think they shave their heads. Yeah, as the three of them gazed at the ground, Sokka moved in the awkward silence. So, why won't he teach you waterbending again? With a groan, Katara fell onto her sleeping bag. Aang's nose wrinkled. He gritted his teeth and uttered, Master Poophead won't teach her because she's a girl. He arched an eyebrow. Then why don't you teach her? Katara appeared. Why didn't I think of that? She exclaimed with joy, but she was a little annoyed that Sokka had actually said something wise. For once she gave Aang a look. At night you could teach me all the moves you learn from Master Paku. That way you get to practice and I get to learn waterbending. Everyone's happy. Sokka complained. I'm not happy. Her hands were on her hips. She remarked, but you're never happy. Come on, Aang. She exclaimed as she and the bald boy ran for the tent's entrance. Momo's ears perked up, and he looked at the lemur and then at Sokka. What are you looking at? With wide eyes, Sora questioned, they won't teach women? Leaning over the side of the boat to gaze at the vast ocean surrounding them, Naruto nodded. Yeah, I had to convince them that all women of the Namikaze family know how to fight. It was the only way I could convince them to teach you. She scowled before she joined her fiancé in admiring the sparkling water. She hissed, that's sexist. When I get over there I'm going to give them a piece of my mind. Remembering that he was the Crimson King, Kyuubi's chosen, she whispered to herself, do you ever wonder what I'd be like to be able to bend the normal elements? That's silly, you can. Easier, I bet. Even with being the Crimson King, it's somewhat difficult to bend an element that is not natural to you. Lightning is stubborn and likes to have a mind of its own. We can't force lightning to bend to our will like the other benders can. We can only guide it and produce it. She gave a nod. Yeah, say, has your father given you a Thunderbird yet? He arched an eyebrow and then laughed. Has he given me a Thunderbird yet? Why do you ask? Her face lit up with joy. She bit her bottom lip, clearly suppressing a squeal, and said, my father has been hinting about giving me one. I know that Thunderbirds are usually bestowed upon powerful benders like you and your family as familiars, but if so, it would be contrary to her nature to do such girlish things. He laughed. Yes, I have one. She squinted and gave him a shoulder punch. And why didn't you ever tell me? He gave her a smile and reached up to massage the spot where her fist met his. She never held back. I got him on my 16th birthday, only 2 months ago. Besides, my father's been talking to your father about Thunderbirds, so I assumed that you'd get one eventually. So she kissed him tenderly, her lips meeting his, and silenced him after a moment of widening. He closed his eyes and gave it back. For a moment the crew paused and gazed. The captain blinked, then scowled as he turned to face his crew. What the hells are you looking at? This isn't some circus show. Stop staring at the prince and his princess and get back to work before I keyhole your asses all the way back to the Lightning Empire. With only a few glances back at their prince and future queen, the crew jumped and hurried back to work. At last, they released their tender kiss and looked directly into each other's eyes. She put a finger to his lips and shook his head as the blonde opened his mouth to speak. She said, I understand, I've always wanted a Thunderbird and you got one, so you kept it a secret. Unless I ask you, never lie to me. I'm mad at you for not telling me, but that doesn't mean I understand your reasons for not telling me. He put an arm around her shoulders, grinned, and turned to face the fading sun that had turned the water the color of lightning. Don't hurt me and I'll talk to my father about getting you one. You're a powerful swordswoman and lightning bender, so I think he'll agree. Her eyes grew wide as she gazed at him, then grinned and rested her head on his shoulder as she leaned into his warm body. I'd like that. Somewhere, the woman he was watching noticed a certain spiky, long white-haired man sneezing. He sniffed and smiled twistedly, saying, my bratty apprentice is either talking about me or is having a moment with Sora. His digression was interrupted when he saw a shadow hanging over him. Maybe I should have gone along to use them as research in case they go to the next level. Minato and Kushina were great inspiration, so, he said to himself. When he turned around, he saw all of the women in the hot spring, bent and armed with weapons, staring at him murderously. Jiraiya went pale. He yelled, "Curse you, Naruto," before high-pitched girlish screams followed. Naruto's mornings were usually quiet. Even when Sora was visiting, he would always awaken to the sound of the sun striking his eyelids or his eternal clock, but it was different today in an extremely unprincipled manner. He had woken up and vowed to keep Jiraiya in the dark at all costs, or else he would suffer for the rest of his life. His face slammed down in front of his body as he woke up on the floor. He groaned in agony and sat up slowly while wincefully rubbing his face. He had never, ever fallen out of bed. His pride was a little burnt, and he felt totally ashamed. He attempted to stand up so he could fall again. Bewildered, he used his bed to support himself and glanced around hastily. All of the furniture was sliding toward the wall, giving the impression that the room was tilted significantly. Fortunately, screws and nails held the bed in place, but he was unable to say the same about the rest of his belongings. His face was strangely expressionless as he watched his belongings fly everywhere and crash. He wished he could find someone who would clean up the mess. The idea of doing it himself made him shudder. With a sigh, he released the bed and moved deftly in the direction of the wall. When he turned the knob, the door flew open, and he slid out to the wall with ease. Bracing himself with his hands, fallen crew members staggered and fell from left to right, their faces displaying complete confusion. This was not an ordinary event. He was relieved that he had not experienced this on his previous visit to the North Pole. There was a loud thunk and a shriek in the room next to him, followed by a barrage of profanities that would make sailors red in the face. He gazed at the door for a minute, and sure enough, it opened, letting a furiously irate Sora out. He embraced her tightly as she flew into his arms. He said, "Good morning to you too." Her hair was a little frizzy from sleeping, and her eyes showed how exhausted she was as she glared up at him. She patted it down slowly. "This is anything but a good morning, Naruto." He shrugged and sighed. "Well, I can't disagree with you there. What the hell's going on?" As they walked over fallen and stunned sailors, he said, "I don't know, but I sure as hell am going to." He moved slowly down the slanted hallways, closely followed by Sora. It was a little difficult to climb the stairs when standing right side up. It was difficult to climb the slanted steps because they were a little damp from the morning sea breeze. Before they eventually made it to the top, the two staggered a little. The captain yelled, "Damn icebergs! I hate the cold," over his head. The scarred man was screaming and shaking his fists at a big iceberg that was holding part of the boat up from the water, and the two turned and started to perspire with every shout. His voice became higher and higher, like a child having a tantrum. The crew appeared a little embarrassed by their navigational error as well as their captain, who, judging by the endless stream of profanities that escaped his lips, didn't seem to want to stop for very long. Naruto faced a member of the crew. "What happened?" The man bowed courteously after appearing a little surprised to be addressed. "I'm sorry if we've caused you any disturbances, princess." Without glaring at him, Sora stated bluntly, "I fell out of my bed." Although she was irritated that they were stranded, she was aware that traveling through the poles was dangerous and unstable at best. She was amazed that they hit the biggest iceberg she could see, even though they were able to avoid all of them. At her remark, the sailor blinked. It was rather unusual for royal and noble women to discuss such a lack of grace. However, the person speaking was Sora, a woman who spars with the queen for the majority of the day and doesn't conceal such mistakes either. "We got swept by the current into it. I apologize again." He gave a bow. He was waved away by Naruto as he walked toward the captain and dodged a fist that was thrown at him. He said, "It happens, Captain. And burn your wife and children." He stared at him. "You know something's amiss when he starts shouting things like that at an iceberg of all things. Send you to the deepest depths of hell to be devoured by the Kyuubi and—" Naruto yelled, "Captain," and the man turned to face him. He exclaimed, "Oh, my prince," in shock. "I suppose a traditional good morning would not be appropriate at the current time." Naruto shook his head and laughed. He turned to face the big block of ice and said, "No sir, can you get the boat free? It would take a while, maybe a day or two." He gave a headshake. He whispered, "I don't have that amount of time." "Use fire." "Good morning to you too, Kyuubi." Yeah, spare me the formalities and use fire already, you stubborn kid. The sooner you do, the sooner you get a hot piece of white-haired vixen." Naruto reddened, shook his head, and let out a low-pitched growl. If he wanted to arrive on time, he had no other option. With a sigh, he motioned the men to remain behind. He felt the heat rising in his chest as he focused and closed his eyes as he opened his now red eyes. A tornado of crimson and black flames encircled him as the other men gaped at the screen. Sora gave a small smirk. With a fluid movement of his hands, Naruto allowed the fire to follow his fingertips and shoot itself in the direction of the cold pillar. It struck with a great, strong blast that blinded them by pushing the snow that was resting into the air and blowing their clothes and hair back. They witnessed the iceberg beginning to break apart as the snow in the sky subsided, allowing the ship to float again. Crew members applauded. Sora rolled her eyes when he turned to smile at her. She said, half-heartedly, "Show off. You used fire. I'm so proud of you, kid, so proud indeed." "Go away. Never." The captain grinned at his nation's air and remarked, "Good job there, Prince." Naruto turned and grinned appreciatively at the diversion from the Great Spirit's cries for him to pay attention. "Thanks to you we might just get there on time." He turned and went to where Sora was leaning over the edge, looking around with a childlike curiosity, saying dismissively, "It was nothing." He eyed her out of the corner of his eye and said, rather quietly, "It's beautiful, isn't it?" All she could do was nod, her gaze scrutinizing each snowflake, glacier, and formation. They gleamed like a necklace of diamonds, but they were pure and untouchable by mortal hands. She adored it. It was difficult to believe that they had only just entered the waters of the North Pole yesterday. Although it was already cold, there had not yet been any snowfall or similar conditions. But as soon as the snow began to turn gray and black, the scene was ruined. She blinked and extended her hand, causing a black snowflake to land on it. With caution in her voice, she said, "Naruto." His eyes narrowed as he looked up and turned to face the sky. He also extended a hand and let one land on it. When he realized it was soot and ash, he growled. Sora's eyes widened as he growled, "Fire Nation." She then hissed something that he could not hear, but he was certain it was anything but flattering. "Captain," he yelled, his voice hard and unusually calm, "when will we arrive?" The captain only needed a minute to compute after noticing the urgency in his prince's voice. "Within the hour, my prince." "Make it faster if you can." The captain bowed to his sailors and then turned yellow, saying, "Understood." Naruto turned to face Sora, who returned his gaze. He sighed after a moment and craned his neck to gaze up at the sky. "I don't like this." The full moon turned bloody red, and Yu gasped and gripped her head immediately. Sokka's gaze was fixed on her worriedly. He inquired, "Are you all right?" "I feel faint." Holding the reins in one hand and Oppa's head in the other, Aang sat on his head and said, "I feel it too." In distress, he gazed up at the red moon. "The moon spirit is in trouble." Yu took her hands off her head and placed them on her knees, saying, "I owe the moon spirit my life." As they gripped her dress, she glanced down at them. Sokka leaned forward and asked, "What do you mean?" She closed her eyes and spoke about her past, saying, "When I was born I was very sick and very weak. Most babies cry when they're born, but I was born as if I were asleep. My eyes closed. Our healers did everything they could. They told my mother and father I was going to die. My father pleaded with the spirits to save me that night, beneath the full moon. He brought me to the oasis and placed me in the pond. My dark hair turned white. I opened my eyes and began to cry, and they knew I would live. That's why my mother named me Yu, for the moon." As the moon turned red and threw its fiery hue onto the world below, Naruto watched with narrowed eyes as this occurred. The crew behind him began to panic, but Sora remained composed by his side. "What do you think is happening?" "I don't know." Kyuubi. In his mind, he heard the great beast yawning. "What, kid, I was sleeping. It's night, you know. The moon is red." "What?" The great spirit's tone lost all of its fatigue. "The moon is red. Are you not seeing this? I'm in a cave at the moment, Kit. Do you know what's going on? My guess is that the moon spirit is in trouble." That sounded awful. Naruto glanced at his fiancée and then returned his attention to the moon. "Can you lead me to her once we arrive?" "Of course I can. Once you arrive, alert me." "Will do." What did Kyuubi say? Naruto looked over at Sora. He couldn't understand how, but she always had a sixth sense when he was talking to the great spirit. The moon spirit is in trouble. She blinked. Who would be stupid enough to harm a spirit? He said, "I'll give you one guess." A familiar but playful voice said, "Ooh, if I get it right, do I get a prize?" When the two turned around, they saw a 12-year-old boy sitting on the ledge, swinging his legs back and forth and grinning broadly. His bangs circled his innocent face, and his long, dark blue hair, which reached the small of his back, was pulled into a low ponytail. One of his eyes was the darkest shade of blue, and the other was the deepest shade of black. His coat was dark blue, sleeveless, and split in two from the butt down. He had bandages on his wrists and was wearing black pants. On his back lay a big sword. and a dragon tattoo with its head in the middle of his hand encircled his right arm. You wouldn't believe that the naive boy was actually 18 based on his appearance. Naruto grinned at his friend and said, "Aki, it's not that I don't enjoy your company, but what are you doing here?" Leaning back over the water on perilous levels, he grinned, "Your father sent me." Sora's eyebrow went up, "And what's a general of the royal army doing here?" In the Empire's army, Aki was the most gifted and youthful general at 17. He was promoted to the rank of general. Don't be fooled by his innocent appearance. Aki was a storm condensed into a bottle. If you aggravate him, he will blow up. It's also risky to discuss his height. Despite being a lightning bender, the 18-year-old wasn't very good at it. Despite this, he is a demon when armed. No one can match him in terms of weaponry. He can channel lightning into blades and increase the lethality of strikes despite his limited control, but aside from that, he might be categorized as a non-bender. The Empire called him the Blue Dragon unless they wanted to die. No one who knew who he was questioned or brought up his growth issue. Only members of the royal family could make fun of his height. The boy with the blue hair smiled at her as he gazed at the moon. His smile dimmed. "We intercepted a Fire Navy ship and found out they were going to raid the North Pole. Your father sent me as backup just in case. Though I'm not sure I arrived in time." "How do you get here?" inquired Naruto. "I don't see any ships that could have carried you." With a whistle that reverberated off the walls, Aki put 2 fingers in his mouth and said, "Oh, that's easy." And then there was a great sound, a roar and a screech from the sky. A figure bounded down to the ground at the speed at which it was falling. The crew members who saw it yelled out, fearing it would ram them. Large wings, however, spread out and stopped it in the air next to Aki before it could strike them. It was a dragon-sized creature. Despite being a male, it had the body of a lioness and had big golden wings that extended from its back. Its front feet were talons, and its mouth was a strong, pointed bird's beak. It had a kyubi ornament on a chain necklace around its neck. With wide eyes, the captain muttered, "A thunderbird." Naruto turned to the general, his annoyance radiating from him as he narrowed his eyes at the ornament. "Aki, why's my thunderbird with you?" When the thunderbird appeared to recognize its master and flew toward him, Aki's smile only got bigger. "I borrowed him." The definition of borrowing is asking to use something before using it. This is stealing. "It's not stealing. The emperor told me to use Storm, so I did not steal your birdie." As Storm landed beside him and pressed its beak against his face, Naruto gave him a small frown. He turned to the thunderbird, grinned, and began to pat its big head. "How are you, boy? Did you miss me?" The creature slowly nodded its head in response to the question. Purring at the touch of its master, it turned to Sora, who was staring at the creature in awe, and opened its electric yellow eyes. Naruto became aware of this. He introduced himself and said, "This is Sora, my fiancé. Sora, meet Storm." As the thunderbird gazed at her and then approached her, Sora allowed a tiny smile to appear on her face. She stood motionless, but tensed slightly as a sign of acceptance. The bird sniffed her and then stuck out its tongue to lick her cheek. Aki sulked. "He didn't warm up to me that fast. He was clawing and biting at me for hours before we got him to let me ride him." Naruto smiled. He exclaimed, "That's my Storm," and the thunderbird roared in agreement. Aki's bottom lip protruded. "Why are you so mean to me?" "Because you steal my things." The little man sighed. "I did not steal your thunderbird." "Who says I was only talking about him?" Aki blushed and fell silent, then turned away and muttered that he always gave back what he took. Shaking his head, Naruto looked back at the crimson moon. "Captain, how much longer?" "Not long. Be more specific." The captain turned to him and smiled. He pointed to the approaching large chunk of ice and said, "Not long at all." He groaned when he noticed that Fire Nation ships were encircling it. They would need to locate a safe docking location. Aki smiled as he turned to face the battle. He laughed and said, "Looks like I'll have some fun while I'm here. I'm getting new toys today." Naruto shuddered. Aki didn't have toys. "Just play your game away from me, alright?" Aki gave a furious nod. "Got it. Oh, I can't wait for the blood to fly," he chuckled. Ignoring the last remark, the prince shook his head. "Kyubi." "Yes, Kit? Time to work your magic." With the moon spirit imprisoned in a bag, Joe exclaimed, "I am a legend now." He raised his hands in the air, reveling in the glory that lay ahead as he spoke. His voice grew more impassioned. "The Fire Nation will for generations tell stories about the great Joe who darkened the moon. They will call me Joe the Conqueror. Joe the Moonslayer. Joe the Invincible," he exclaimed. When Momo leapt onto his head and began tugging at his facial hair and scratching his face, he gasped, "Get it off." He gave a shout, "Get it off." The lemur flew off as the men reached for it, landing on the avatar's outstretched arm before making its way to the bald boy's shoulder. "Katara. Sokka, and Aang quickly tensed into combat stances as they prepared for battle. With a frown, Joe held up the bag and withdrew his hand, preparing to kill the spirit by burning it. Don't bother. The Avatar swiftly dropped his staff and raised his hand in surrender as his eyes grew wide. Joe, don't. He continued to prepare to burn the spirit and declared, it's my destiny to destroy the moon and the water tribe. Without moving his hands from their position of surrender in the air, the Avatar said, destroying the moon won't hurt just the water tribe. It will hurt everyone including you. Without the moon everything would fall out of balance. You have no idea what kind of chaos that would unleash upon the world. Standing atop one of the two bridges adjacent to the oasis, Iroh said, he is right, Joe. General Iroh, why am I not surprised to discover your treachery? I'm no traitor, Joe. The Fire Nation needs the moon too. We all depend on the balance. Whatever you do to that spirit, I'll unleash a new tenfold. He yelled as he stood up. Let her go now. Joe gritted his teeth for a second before realizing he was out of the running. The moon's gentle hue returned as he signed and knelt down, allowing the spirit to return to the oasis. He was upset. Why should the great Joe be compelled to allow the moon spirit to survive in spite of his fate? He had been supposed to destroy it. Dare they make fun of him? He stood before he let fire fly from its hands. The flames aimed directly at the moon spirit, and his anger began to show on his face. The sight of the flames racing toward the spirit caused everyone's eyes to widen. Their hair and clothing blasted forward in the aftershock as a loud thunder crack and a flash of red zipped past them in that instant. When a hand shot out of the flames and caught Joe's face, he was unable to convey his surprise. There was no time for him to before he blacked out. He felt the back of his head hit the ground, leaving a huge crater. Enraged by what had just transpired, Iroh threw a flurry of flames at the Fire Nation soldiers. They were never going to succeed. After that was resolved, everyone's attention was drawn to the newcomer wearing a charred cloak. The figure sighed and looked around at the group. The figure, who was clearly a boy, said, well, that was a close one. He hovered over the koi fish with his covert eyes. With everyone once more in battle positions, Sokka demanded, who are you? The stranger's face lit up with gratitude. He sighed as he glanced down at himself. He undid the cloak and let it drop, murmuring, I can't use this anymore. The others merely blinked, but Katara's face brightened. You grinned. An attractive and firm adolescent with spiky blonde hair and sky-blue eyes stood in front of them when he saw Princess Yu. His whisker lines bent slightly to make room for his wide smile. When Sokka noticed this, she took a protective stance in front of her once more. He demanded, who are you? Yu pushed him gently to the side and hissed, Sokka, stand down. He blinked. She wasn't even concerned that this man had just defeated Joe. What, but? It's nice to see you again, Naruto. Sokka's mouth fell open. Prince Naruto Namikaze was this person. He was not at all what he had imagined as Katara gazed at him. Her face began to heat up, but Aang was observing him with a cunning expression. For some reason, Naruto felt a slight sense of a spirit, but he couldn't pinpoint the cause. Spirits didn't feel like humans. With a smile on his face, Naruto approached her, lifted her hand, and planted a kiss on its back. And it's nice to see you again, princess. Wait, hold up, Sokka yelled. You're the prince of the Lightning Empire? Iroh's eyes widened at this, and he gazed at the young man. Indeed, he saw Minato in himself before now. He had heard his nephew talk about the prince, but he had never taken it seriously. The blonde grinned as she turned to face the boy. He said, yes, and then bowed to each of them. My name is Naruto Namikaze, Crown Prince of the Lightning Empire. It's an honor to meet you all. With his hands casually behind his neck, Aki dribbled the severed head of a Fire Nation soldier on his knee while smiling. There was nothing but blood and bones all around him. A cemetery of severed body parts, as if a huge color bomb had detonated. Blood turned the water, snow, and ice a vivid red. As Sora turned the corner and gazed at the scene without emotion, she remarked, you really went crazy, again. With a terrified expression on his face, she turned to face him and arched an eyebrow at his head. What are you doing? He grinned broadly and took his toy in his blood-stained hands. Well, I was bored and had this sudden urge to play with a ball to relieve me of it, but I realized I didn't have one then. I realized that human heads are circular. They work just as well but with more squish and less bounce. Sora sighed and shook her head. She was occasionally concerned about Aki after the little man used a victim's leg as a bat. Minato made sure he was completely sane, which was the frightening aspect. If he ever did lose his mind, she feared the day. Have fun? Aki asked, glancing at the lone bloodstain on the hem of her clothing. She frowned at her error and looked down, blinking. If she ever found out, Kushina wouldn't let her forget it. She sighed and said, not as much as I hoped. I've only confronted armatures so far. It's pathetic. Sure, they have their numbers, but it counts for nothing if they don't have skill. With a nod of comprehension, Aki tossed his toy above his head. They did seem a little too easy to beat now that you mention it. He exhaled. What does one have to do to get a decent fight anymore? She gave an eye roll. Go to war. I wish there was war. There is. I wish we were fighting in it. We are. He raised an eyebrow, blinked, and turned to face Sora. Since when? She only got a smile from Aki when she said, I forgot you don't pay attention in debriefings. We've been preparing to fight for a few years. The moment we set foot onto the North Pole, we invited ourselves into it. We are officially part of this war. Aki laughed gleefully and threw back his head. Oh man. I love being a general in the Empire. You never know what's around the corner with Namakazes on the throne. Sora gave a shrug. Naruto's leading the battlefront. Lord Minato wishes for him to get a taste of war before he takes the throne. Something about gaining wisdom for when he reigns as emperor. Aki blinked. The prince is leading the troops. Who's he taking? She said, I'm not sure yet, not a full-on army but those powerful enough to equal one. Before a cunning grin appeared on his face, Aki complained. The Namakazes are an army in themselves. Then again, so are the generals. Sora gave a nod. He'll probably take a general or two and some foot soldiers along with the combined forces of our allies. That's why he's marrying Princess Yua, right? It's you, Aki. You, right? He asked, bouncing on the balls of his feet without paying much attention. She gave him a fierce look. Yes, she snarled. He's marrying Princess Yu as a political marriage. I'm going to be empress, though. She said with pride, depending on who you're talking to. The wife of the emperor in the Lightning Empire was referred to as the queen or the empress for her part. Sora preferred empress. Of course, my future queen. He said in a derisive bow. His laughter made him jump up and down. My empress. The future wife of the emperor. The light of the people who carry their burdens on her bosom. He exclaimed. She gave him a fierce glare as she flushed. Aki. Just you wait until I'm empress. You'll regret this. She screamed. As she reached for her sharp sword, he jumped away from her and sang, if it's my queen's wishes then I shall accept her word as law. You? His eyes hardened as he peered behind her and said, this'll have to wait princess, we've got company. Drawing her sword, she turned and watched as soldiers from the Fire Nation marched around the corner, paused to look at the destruction, and then charged at them. Sora proposed, I take half and you take half. He drew two swords on his back and senbon needles in his free hand before saying, of course, if it's the princess's wish then so be it. You will stop at this instant. With a smile, he tossed the needles with skill, each striking the mark in the middle of the head. Of course, princess. Your wish is my command. Iroh gazed in disbelief at the Lightning Prince. This boy was trained to risk everything for his people and their safety. He was the son of the Yellow Flash. He was the heir to the mysterious and secretive, impenetrable empire. He felt small, unimportant, and helpless for the first time in a long time. It took him some time to recognize the feeling because it was so alien. Only a spirit would have the poise, sway, and menace that the prince exuded as he stood before them. He was certain of his skills and not conceited. He exuded power as if he were Emperor Minato Namikaze. His former battle defeater. His crystalline blue eyes were dancing with laughter at the wide open mouths of those in front of him. While his golden hair fluttered in the wind like luminous rays of light, Iroh could see he was relishing every moment of this. He held out a hand to her and said, you, in a naturally raspy voice that would make women swoon. You've gotten much more beautiful these past years. How are you? She approached him and accepted it while grinning and blushing. The smile never left her face as she gazed at her betrothed's attractive face, but she said sadly, I could be better. My people are in danger. I already have people taking care of it, though I must apologize that the streets of your beautiful city shall be painted red for a while. She gave a headshake. As long as my people are safe. Aang questioned sharply, wait, what do you mean by painted red? You're not hurting anyone, are you? Naruto raised an eyebrow in his direction. What was that? He yelled, you can't hurt them, they're people. Naruto squinted his eyes. Naruto said, tell me, Avatar, since he was unquestionably the Avatar. Can you win a war that's lasted 100 years with petty words filled with lies? Can you win a war without harm? War spares no one, Airbender, not even children, and will always be filled with nothing but death, blood and tears until it's won. True, words will help, but it cannot win a battle on its own. After blinking at the sage advice, Iroh grinned a little. He learned a lot from his father. In the pit of his stomach, he felt a fearful respect for the boy. Form words alone did not win the war. Regretfully, both sides suffer fatalities in war. This had to be taught to the Avatar. Aang gave him a fierce look, but killing someone, are you enjoying this? To the Avatar's surprise, Naruto yelled, silence. With a spirit-like authority, I hate war just as much as another, but I cannot avoid it. If I must, I'd rather kill than watch my people. My loved ones and friends get killed, it's kill or be killed in war whether you like it or not. Airbender, and I know I certainly don't. Stop yelling at me for your own ignorance and take up the responsibility you should have fulfilled 100 years ago. Katara yelled. Hey, don't speak to Aang like that. I speak nothing but the truth. You don't need to be so blunt. There's other ways to win the war. Like defeating Fire Lord Ozai. Naruto questioned. What are you going to do? Strut into the heavily armed and well-guarded Fire Nation capital and expect to simply walk up to Ozai and defeat him like that? If you do, then you are more foolish than I anticipated. Iroh said. He's right. Before the others could protest, take it from an old man, war is not as simple as you think it is. A single battle cannot mend or end a war that's lasted 100 years. But, reluctantly, Sokka said, he's right, Katara. His anxious side was urging him to pay attention and trust the blonde. As much as I hate to admit it, he does have a point. But, harming someone, to the surprise of the gong, you said abruptly, you cannot protect without harming another. It's the sad truth. Even you, Aang muttered. Naruto said, you don't have to believe me, Airbender, and then grinned. But at least consider my words because they are true, and even you cannot deny that I, too, was raised to be passive, but I shall turn into the world's most dangerous predator if it's to protect my people and loved ones, and war will inevitably draw out that beast in me. In you, when that time comes, you must make a choice. What will be yours, Avatar? With his mind racing at 1,000,000 miles per hour, Aang nibbled on his bottom lip and remained silent. He was perplexed because the truth and his teachings were engaged in a struggle for supremacy. He turned to face Katara, who was dejectedly accepting it while looking down, but he didn't like this. This was not how he wanted things to go. The truth didn't sit well with him. And you are? Naruto asked abruptly, turning to face Iroh. I'm General Iroh, brother of Fire Lord Ozai. Examining the Fire Nation royal critically, Naruto remarked, so you're Iroh? My father spoke about you, but I never had the chance of meeting you when I was in the Fire Nation. He said you were the most honorable Fire Nation opponent he's ever had. Iroh smiled broadly at the compliment, beaming with pride even more than when he was rewarded for bringing in the Iron Maiden. He couldn't help but feel utterly honored. As Iroh's face fell in utter horror, Naruto added in a venomous tone, you're also his most hated person for capturing his, the Iron Maiden. Curious, Iroh stammered. Who is the Iron Maiden? She must have been very powerful if the Emperor was upset with him. Naruto gave him a scowl, expressing his own bitterness over her capture. That, General Iroh, you'll have to discover yourself. Before it struck him, Iroh arched an eyebrow. Blonde hair, the tenacity and resolve of a mother moose lion defending her cubs under torture, that noble appearance, and the way she speaks are all too high class to be of the lower or middle classes. Her piercing gaze, which oddly reminded him of Emperor Minato, made him go pale and nearly stopped in horror. A princess was the Iron Maiden. The only word he could utter was, shit. Naruto arched an eyebrow and then laughed sarcastically. Everyone but you stared at him in horror as he said, so, you figured it out? You're smarter than I thought. Do I have to silence you? Iroh sighed and shook his head quickly. I am accompanying my nephew in banishment. Knowing won't do my nation any good or yours any harm. I shall not speak a word of this even to him, as I am a man of honor. He trailed off, learning that Zuko, his Fire Nation friend, the only person he had met there who wasn't a woman, had been banished from his home. Banishment? Your only nephew is, he said. His stomach churned with pity and guilt, but he pushed it away. He would give it some thought later, but for now he had other priorities, such as safeguarding his fiancé's people. All he could do was pray to whatever god or spirit was listening that he wouldn't encounter Zuko. You know, Kit, the higher-ups usually do shit like that just for their own entertainment. As I've said many times before, immortality gets quite lonely and boring, and we take our entertainment where we can get it. You running into Zuko would be right up that entertainment alley. Naruto gave a mental growl. Do not jinx me, Kyuubi. But jinxing humans, especially you, is so much fun. You can't expect me to simply stop. Jinx the Avatar then. I know spirits are able to do that. Great spirits, like me, don't bother with the Avatar because if he talks to us he'll seek us out again and again. It would get quite annoying. But you annoy me. Listen to your own words for once and don't simply pop in to have a conversation whenever you damn feel like it. The beast let out a deep laugh and said, I am a great spirit. I am allowed to pop in at random times and annoy you. Naruto grimaced before instantly regaining his composure and turning to face those in front of him who, fortunately, were not aware of his glower. He turned to Yu, who nodded and wrapped her arms elegantly around his left arm. The two then began to walk royally towards the exit, not realizing Joe was no longer there. Sokka yelled, wait. Where are you going? Yu's straightforward response was, to protect my people. She would soon leave the Northern Water Tribe to live in the Lightning Empire as its princess and Naruto Namikaze's wife. Though she would never become a queen like Sora since she might not see her people again, she would do everything in her power to keep them safe. Sokka reminded Yu, "It's dangerous out there." She detested the thought of Yu venturing into such a hazardous area. With a sharp, nearly hissing voice, Yu declared, "I am a princess, Sokka. It's my duty." She narrowed her eyes at him. "If anyone is to venture out into the heart of battle, it's the royals. We are a beacon of hope for everyone. If we hide and cower behind the walls of our homes while our people are out fighting and dying, how are we ever supposed to win? We shall stand at the center, prideful and tall as our people fight as a sign of hope and a beacon of life and future. As long as we stand, so does our nation, and they will always fight for that future." With a nearly expressionless face, Naruto said, "Children dream of being a princess or a prince. They believe it is easy. You'd live in a castle, have servants to grant your every whim, get everything your heart desires at the snap of your fingers, and one day maybe run a nation. However, it is not as easy and simple as that. True, we get those things, but we keep the country together, we protect it, we care to the needs of the people, we provide for them, we give them hope, we are their future. If we fall, so shall they. We are the hearts of their bodies, the brains of their being. We keep them living, and in turn they serve us. Goodbye, Avatar. We shall meet in the future, that I have no doubt." As the two departed, the three exchanged glances. Katara said, "What are we going to do?" "Take responsibility," Aang said, his eyes and tattoos glowing. "We'll protect the North Pole." "Aang, don't touch him, Katara." He entered the water and stood there in a contemplative pose. The koi fish ceased their circling and gazed directly at him, their eyes beginning to light up as well. The water began to glow with a strong blue and silver that spread out from the oasis as Aang's body quickly sank into the shallow pool. When they were outside, the water rose high and shaped itself into a huge, hand and leg koi fish. A ball of glowing air surrounded Aang, who remained glowing in the center. The koi fish followed Aang as he raised his hands and began to move through the city. Zhou ran, panting, clutching his aching body. The presence of the Lightning Prince was unexpected. All of his plans to conquer were being ruined by this. The invasion's chances of success simply plummeted. But the Moon Spirit survived. Zhou was not a fool. He was aware that the child of a one-man army was too strong for him. He understood that he would receive a great reward and that any potential loss would be outweighed if he told the Fire Lord about the prince. Since Zuko was 12, the Fire Lord and his family had developed a strong interest in the Lightning Empire, but no one was sure why the potential reward he would soon receive nearly made him drool. After running around a corner, he came to a halt. Blood and body parts were all around him. When he realized it was his own men, he frowned and turned to go in a different direction. He didn't want his clothing to be dyed a bloody red for good. They were far more valuable than the soiled blood of a foot soldier. He barely avoided the fire that struck the icy ground in front of him as he dashed into an open area. His eyes widened as he leapt back and faced the source. Prince Zuko stood a few feet above him, his face slightly burned and bruised from the near-fatal explosion. He was staring accusingly at the Admiral with hard, narrowed eyes. "You're alive?" he inquired. Startled, Zuko yelled angrily, "You tried to have me killed?" and bowed a few fireballs before hurling them at the Admiral, who ducked and caused the snow to melt into steam. Zhou exclaimed, "Of course I did. You're the Blue Spirit," as Zuko released the steam and approached him in a combat stance. "The enemy of the Fire Nation. You freed the Avatar." "I had no choice." Zuko lashed out at his adversary once more. Zhou frowned at all of the failures. Zuko turned out to be alive. The Moon Spirit survived, and the blonde-haired bimbo first appeared. He detested the fact that nothing was going as planned. "What's wrong, Zhou?" Zuko asked in a mocking tone, but his expression stayed stern. "You're looking quite ugly with that face of yours." Zhou snarled. I have no time to worry about you right now. I have bigger fish to fry." "I'm not good enough for you, Zhou." Zuko frowned, a little offended. "Aren't I the one who beat you in an Agni Kai?" Zhou gave the banished prince a fierce look. "No, I do have a prince to worry about, but it's not you, so don't flatter yourself," he spit. "A prince? However, the only member of the Northern Water Tribe is a princess." Zuko pondered. Since he had just been crowned Earth King at a young age and was the only prince, albeit exiled, in the Fire Nation, the Earth Kingdom also lacked a prince, so who else was present? His eyes grew wide as a memory of a blonde smiling popped into his head. "Naruto," he understated. Zhou's eyes narrowed. "How do you know about that?" He frowned and said, "That's not any of your concern, Zhou." "Naruto." "Hey!" Aki cried in horror as a gigantic water-based fish attacked and carried away his victims. "Those were my toys." Sora glared at the fish that headed for the ocean. While growling and wringing out her drenched hair, she hissed, "I hate fish." Aki turned to face her, his anger evident. "How dare that brainless scaled animal steal my toys? Mine." I'll send him to the pits of hell to be tortured and devoured by Kyuubi before being torn apart cell by cell. Unfortunately, you can't do that, Sora complained, somewhat agreeing with him. Why not? He's on our side, you psychotic idiot. His shoulders slumped as he pouted. He turned and saw the koi fish begin destroying Fire Nation battleships as they attempted to escape, saying, "Not fair. He's not that bad." She noted, "Yes, but his swings are sloppy, must be the Avatar." "What makes you say that?" "Rumor is that the Avatar is just a kid. His swings are sloppy and untrained. No matter how much power and past wisdom is behind it, he needs more practice." "Ooh. I could teach him," Aki chuckled, bouncing up and down while swiveling his blade. As she walked past him, Sora remarked, "Running for his life does not count as training." "Ah, he's going under." She turned to see that the ships that had not been destroyed were disappearing on the full moon reflecting waters, and in fact, the fish was melting into the water. She sighed and walked back into the city, with Aki running at her heels, saying, "That wasn't as fantastic as I hoped." She sighed. "I hoped it would last longer. How boring." Around the bridge Zuko and Joe were on. Hands that looked like water sprang out of the water when the water circled in their direction. The two's eyes widened, and Zuko swiftly ducked out of the way, but Joe wasn't as lucky as the hands that seized him with his hand outstretched. Zuko leapt from his squat and ran to the edge. He yelled, "Grab my hand." Joe gave the prince a look. He would never, ever accept assistance from a shamed boy. A banished prince dragged violently beneath the water. He grimaced and clenched his hands to his chest. Zuko let out a sorrowful sigh before his face lit up with resolve. He needed to locate and bring back to the Fire Nation two individuals. One for his own honor and the other for personal reasons. He wanted answers, too. As he escorted Yu through the city, Naruto thought, so he took responsibility. He watched as the fish vanished. With a smile, Yu held her fiancé closer to her. "The Avatar is filled with responsibility," she said. Naruto sneered. "I call it a hero complex. Why do you hate the Avatar so much?" After observing her inquisitive look, Naruto let out a sigh. "If he did his duty 100 years ago instead of vanishing and running away, then we wouldn't be in this mess." "Well, at least one good thing came out of it." "What?" She fingered her necklace and said softly, with a blissful smile, "If there hadn't been a war, then you'd never have left the Lightning Empire. You wouldn't have been betrothed to me. We would never have met." He smirked after blinking. "I guess you're right. There you are," Sora exclaimed as she ran in their direction, Aki by her side. When she saw Yu, she grabbed onto Naruto's other arm, unaccustomed to a clinging Sora. Naruto arched an eyebrow at that. "So, you're Yu?" She gave a nod. "You must be Sora, the future queen of the Lightning Empire." "I prefer Empress." Yu grinned. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend the future queen." Aki grinned joyfully at the impending mayhem and conflict, while Naruto blinked as he watched lightning crackle between their glares at one another. "Is everything taken care of?" Aki gave a nod. "Of course, Prince Naru." "My name is Naruto. Did you expect anything less?" The prince shook his head and sighed. "Of course not. The Avatar also threw in some help. He brought out the Avatar mojo on the firebenders and their ships stole my toys." He did. "Good, that means he's taking responsibility," Aki complained. "Good. He stole my toys." Naruto's looked at him with a hint of amusement and remarked, "He's taking responsibility, Aki. Right now, that's all that matters." With a sideways head tilt, Aki questioned, "Isn't he 100 years late?" "Yes. Well, the saying is, better late than never, right?" Naruto shrugged and grunted. An unknown voice yelled, "Naruto? Oh shit, I know that voice. Screw me 9 ways to hell." "Ha ha. I told you the fates just love to do this kind of thing. As for screwing you 9 ways to hell, I'd rather not. However, I'm sure Sora and you would be happy to." "Shut up, you horny furball." The group turned to see a boy who was bruised and had a fire scar across half of his face. He was staring at Naruto with a dejected and betrayed expression on his face, not at the others. Naruto briefly displayed his guilt before hiding it. He recognized it right away. "Shit, kid. It looks like you went face to face with a house fire that refused to go out. Not the smartest thing, but there has been humans who've done it before." Naruto whispered, "What happened to you, Zuko?" while pointing to the scar. Zuko raised his hand to touch his scar and turned away. "My father. I'm banished for not fighting back." Naruto's eyes were closed. "I see." He recalled the Fire Lord's demeanor from his time in the Fire Nation. Despite gaining the men's favor and suspicions, he was still able to see the power-hungry and bloodlustful expressions that were concealed behind deceitful eyes. He was certain that if someone didn't defend themselves, he would exile them. Zuko asked, turning his head to look at the blonde, his eyes hardening, "Why are you here, Naruto?" Naruto turned to face you. I'm here to pick up you, my betrothed. When Naruto glanced at Sora, she huffed and confirmed, it's a political marriage. Who are they, Naruto? The tone of anger caused Naruto's brow to furrow. He understood it, of course. But the Zuko he knew was hardly able to control his temper, knowing that this was the quiet before the storm. He let out a sigh. Sora, my fiancée and future queen. Then Sora corrected, Empress, he finished, pointing to the stunning girl beside him, of the Lightning Empire. He glanced down at the white-haired young woman clinging to his arm and said, You, princess of the Northern Water Tribe and my betrothed. Having heard a few stories from the Gong and Naruto during his visit, Yu said courteously, Hello, Zuko. And this is Aki, a general in the Empire's army. Don't let his looks fool you. He's older and much more skilled than he seems. So you're Zuzu? Well, so much for Zuko's composure that made the banished prince twitch. Aki, Zuko is his name. You're allowed to call me Naru because we're close, but you don't know Zuko. Ah, but, with firmness, he said, no buts. Aki was also aware of when to give up. He leaned back idly and sighed, fine, fine. Why'd you leave, Naruto? Our nations are at war, Zuko. He yelled angrily, is that why you befriended me and the girls? Just to be a spy and then leave like all we did was nothing? Zuko, I'd never do that. I was never a spy. Then why were you there? He smiled distantly but sorrowfully as he said, my uncle figure offered to take me. Zuko, I wanted to get out of the Empire's walls for once in my life. Can't I do that? Some of the best days of my life were spending it with you and the girls. I didn't have to worry about my princely duties or the fact that we were at war for a while. I was a normal kid, but all good things come to an end. We could have worked something out. Zuko screamed, his face displaying both sadness and rage. We could have been allied nations. You could have come anytime you wanted. That's impossible, Zuko. Why? He yelled, his feelings of betrayal and rage gripping him. Why is it impossible? Naruto. Sora started, but he signaled his dominance with a hand. Your nation has come barging into mine multiple times as if you thought you owned the place you attacked. Even though we had made it clear that we were neutral, we had other things to worry about like sickness and plague that killed many. We were not going to put our people through more death than there already was. We could have fixed that, repaired it all. He's not that bright, is he? Quiet, Kyuubi. To Zuko's surprise, Naruto's eyes hardened considerably and he said, there's another thing. We can never be allies while you hold the Iron Maiden. For a moment, Zuko forgot his anger and blinked. He was baffled as to why the Iron Maiden appeared to be so crucial to the Empire. The Iron Maiden's cell was broken into just before Naruto disappeared and departed with that note. Glancing away from Zuko, Sora said softly, Naruto, the ship's waiting. With the ice beneath him beginning to melt, Zuko hissed, you're not going anywhere. I'm taking you back to the Fire Nation. I might still be banished for not bringing back the Avatar, but at least you'll be there when I do. Everything can go back to the way it was. Things will never be how they were, Zuko. Around him, steam began to rise, giving him a look that made him appear more irate than he actually was. Either way, you're coming back with me. He threw a big fireball at them after bending it. In an attempt to defend his prince, Aki leapt in front of Naruto, but Naruto shoved him aside and extended his hand. The purr of Kyuubi said, that's it. You know what to do, Kit. Naruto caught it and wrapped his fingers around the fireball, banishing it. Zuko blinked in surprise, then frowned. As he executed complex maneuvers and launched ball after ball of fire, he exclaimed, it seems you have some tricks up your sleeve. Try this on for size. Despite appearances, he didn't want to harm his former friend. He simply knew that Naruto could only accompany him back to the Fire Nation while he was chained. After inhaling deeply, Naruto altered gravity, causing the fireballs to crash into the earth. The fire was quickly extinguished because the condensed weight of gravity prevented oxygen from being inhaled. Kyuubi grinned and hummed as he observed Naruto's fight. Very good, Kit, very good indeed. What are you? Zuko inquired, startled. You can't be the Avatar. The Lightning Empire isn't in the cycle. I'm called the Crimson King, chosen of the Great Spirit Kyuubi. I can't bend water or earth, but I can bend fire, wind, gravity and lightning. I am not the Avatar. Zuko gazed at him in astonishment. As soon as he brought up the Kyuubi, his eyes widened. He gained favor in a great spirit, which even the Avatar was not allowed to see. Sora pushed, Naruto, we really have to go. Aki concurred, saying, we can't keep the ship waiting any longer. Zuko yelled, you're not leaving, as he headed toward the group, fire blazing all around him. The ice broke halfway to them, and water rushed upward. It blocked the fireball and formed a solid wall of rushing water, but it appeared unaffected. Then a man and a woman appeared. Both dressed as celestial waterbenders, the woman had silver eyes that gleamed like the moon and flowing white hair. The man's eyes were as blue as the ocean, and his hair was so black that it shone blue. Naruto sensed the tsunamis of power that rolled off of them, not as strong as the Kyuubi, of course, but still powerful. The two turned and grinned at them. Their voices echoed, "Thank you." You whispered, "The spirits." Naruto bowed to the spirits of the ocean and the moon. "I should be the one to say thank you." Their grins spread. The ocean spirit said, "We shall meet again." The moon spirit added, "Sometime soon." Her voice was the most appreciative. It was her life that was saved, after all. After giving a nod of gratitude, the group began to sprint in the direction of the ship. "Wait, Naruto!" yelled Zuko. Naruto paused for a moment. "Goodbye, Zuko." To Katara and Aang, Master Pakku declared, "I've decided to go to the South Pole. It's time we help rebuild our sister tribe." Katara smiled and said, "I'm sure Gran will enjoy seeing you." Since she was forced into his marriage, he said regretfully, "I sure do hope so. I'm not sure how she'll feel about me." "You never know," admitted Aang. "One of my old friends used to say that you have to open your mind to the possibilities." Then Pakku laughed. "True, very true, young Avatar." "Hey, Master Pakku." "Yes, Katara? Do you possibly know anything about the Lightning Empire?" It was not a question, but rather, you met Prince Naruto, did you?" "Yeah, and he said some things that got us thinking." Aang replied. However, he couldn't and wouldn't kill. Naruto is a wise and powerful young man. The Lightning Empire is by far the most powerful out of all the nations. If their emperors have anything to prove about it, I know that Naruto takes his job of being a prince and the future emperor very seriously. He even got us to train you in combat. Aang questioned in surprise. "He did?" Katara questioned, "Then why didn't you train me right away?" He laughed and recalled that it was one of the few occasions when he was truly afraid for his life. "It's our tradition. As you know, this was a special case and the prince can be convincing. The Lightning Empire trains their women, and he told us that a princess in the Lightning Empire could never be weak. Soon she'd no longer be living here, so we consented." "Still a little upset that you had been granted special treatment simply because she was a princess," Katara muttered. "I see, I guess I understand." Then Aang said abruptly, "Hey, has anyone seen Sokka?" The tribal chief stated, "When you was born, the spirits gave me a vision. Gazing up at the full moon," he remarked, "I saw a beautiful young woman become the moon spirit and the man who could save her. I knew this day would come." Sokka looked up at the sky and said softly, "You must be proud." "So proud, and sad." As he and Zuko floated on a raft, Iroh said, "So you met your friend, didn't you?" "Charming young man. I don't think he just befriended you because he had to. I believe he truly wished to be friends with you." "I'm tired." The former general put a hand on his son's shoulder and said, "Then rest. A man needs his rest." Leaning over the boat's rail, Yu watched her old home get smaller and smaller, and she wondered, "What's the empire like?" Aki exclaimed joyfully, once more stooping far too far over the edge, "It's beautiful, princess. Filled with green and shining water. It rarely snows unless you're near the mountains of Nagato. That's where the Biju reside, right?" "Yep. How do you know?" She turned to face Naruto and said, "Naruto told me the first time we met." She started, "Will your parents," and then stopped. He gave her a smile. "They'll love you, and the people." He took her hand and rubbed her cheek with his thumb, saying, "We'll love you just as much, trust me." From behind towering flames, a strong voice declared, "Iroh is a traitor and your brother Zuko is a failure. I have a task for you." With a cunning smile, the girl kneeling in front of him looked up.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.